Hey guys. This is what if Naruto was banished to unknown lands. Naruto is banished to the unknown lands to the west of Konoha. There he forges a new path for himself, a path that will make him new friends, more enemies, and a new destiny. Hit like and subscribe if you like this one, and also please check the author in the description. Let's start.
We are pain, that's all. We are God.
Chapter 1, Banished. Naruto sat down hard on the grass, feeling the soft wind blow through his hair. It's not fair. How could they do this to me? He asked himself. He checked the bandage on the wound on his leg. The villagers and quite a few Nins had felt the need to drive home the point that he was no longer wanted in the village. He tilted his head back to reveal a dirt-stained face with tears streaking down his cheeks. One word echoed in his head over and over again. Banished. Naruto had awoken in the hospital a few days after failing to retrieve Sasuke. He had expected disappointment, but he had really tried his best. Even Sakura had forgiven him, had told him they'd get stronger together. But the village council was not as forgiving. They had held a closed-door meeting with the head of various clans and had come to the conclusion that Naruto was just too dangerous. The first sentence passed on him apparently was death. Naruto smiled faintly at that, because Obasan had taken one village elder and punched him through a wall and told them to pick again. She had been fired as Hokage, of course, but she point-blank told them that no one was going to kill Naruto. Jiraiya and Gamabunta had appeared as well and backed up that claim. Two of the Sannin staring them down had forced the council to alleviate the sentence passed, but would not convince them to back down completely. Don't worry, Naruto, you and I shall see the world together and conduct research for my books. I have a great idea for the next one. Jiraiya had smiled when he told Naruto in his hospital bed. But Naruto could feel the desperation in his voice to make it seem not so bad. His dreams had been crushed. There was no way he would be Hokage now. He would never make Chunin or Jounin. He was no longer a Konohanin. Period. Tsunade herself had hugged him quietly, played with his hair, and told him he'd be safe with Jiraiya. She cried quietly for his lost dreams. Sakura stood shocked in the corner and said nothing. Her heart broken completely, tears pouring down her face. Her team was completely dissolved now. Her best friends. One run away, one forced away. Naruto could not stand it. Early the next morning, he had heard the footsteps in his room, knew someone had come to kill him. He seriously considered letting them do it, but instinct took over and he rolled to the side to avoid a kunai being stabbed into the hospital cot. Several voices of alarm were raised as Naruto dashed out the window to safety. Several weapons were thrown at him, none hit. A particularly well-aimed kunai though pierced his thigh. Glancing down, Naruto could have sworn the person who threw it was one of his teachers from back at the academy. He had no time to wait for Jiraiya, who was still sleeping off the previous night's activities. Naruto Uzumaki left Konoha with nothing except the hospital gown he was wearing. With a sigh, Naruto wiped the tears from his eyes and stood up. He tugged at the civilian clothes he had stolen off a clothesline at a farmhouse not far from Konoha. He glanced back in the direction of Konoha. He supposed eventually Jiraiya would catch up to him. But Naruto had no idea when that would be, and it was far more likely that some other Konoha nin would find him first. Naruto was not the smartest ninja around, but he was no fool. Waiting was not an option. Naruto headed into the wilderness, putting one foot in front of the other, and did not look back again. Naruto was lost, he knew that. Clearly there were no people around for miles. A large series of mountains stared back at him. 2 months had passed since he left Konoha. He had not met a single Konoha nin since leaving. Naruto had long since stopped crying. Jiraiya had not found him either, but Naruto did not blame the Erosenin. He had been keeping away from villages and people, staying in the wilderness. He had found a few things to help him. Once he had come across a slaughtered caravan of merchants. Bandits had probably done it. But they had overlooked a few things. Naruto found some decent-fitting clothes, even if they were white and not orange like he preferred. White boots, white pants, white t-shirt and a white coat. Naruto thought he looked like a ghost, but shrugged. It fit, and it kept him warm. He had also found a few kunai. By found, of course, he meant embedded in the dead bodies of the caravan merchants. After cleaning them, he had put them in a satchel he had recovered from an overturned cart. Living off roots, berries, and captured live animals was easy enough for a trained ninja. But Naruto had no real purpose. He had kept walking in a straight line, never wavering. And now here he was, staring at this mountain range in his way. I wouldn't go up there if I was you. Heh. Naruto spun around at the raspy voice. A decrepit-looking old man smiled back at him. People die in those mountains, that's the pathway to heaven and hell, kid, don't you know that? No one goes there. The old man, clearly a hunter, put down his catch of 3 rabbits and sat. He sighed and pulled out some sticks and began to build a fire. Naruto's hand still grasped the kunai behind his back warily. This was the first person to talk to him in 2 months. It felt odd. And dangerous. Hungry, kid? Eat with me, it gets awful lonely out here if you stay long enough. The man invited him. Naruto eyed him warily but sat, hands still holding the kunai. Ah. A kunai? Nice. So you're a ninja? Kinda far from home, aren't you? We're in the middle of nowhere. That's exactly where I want to be, Naruto said calmly. He didn't think the man meant him no harm. He clearly had no idea who Naruto was. Where you from, kid? The trapper asked as the fire roared to life. He didn't even look at Naruto as he arranged 2 rabbits over the fire to roast. Naruto thought about lying, but saw no real point to it. Konoha, wow. That's a hell of a long way from here, kid. You trying to circle the world? The man seemed to laugh at his own joke and leaned back on his backpack. His eyes locked on Naruto's for a brief second with an intensity that hadn't been there before. We're all running from something, kid. I don't care what your reason is. But going into those mountains is suicide. Most people who have even heard of it are deathly afraid of them. The old man chuckled. They're called the pathways to heaven and hell. You're at what many people call the edge of the world. On the other side of the mountains is a limitless ocean. But these mountains? Well, they're a nasty piece of work. The man poked the rabbits, turning them to cook on the other side. Legend says that travelers who go in these mountains are either sucked into the depths of hell, or pulled into the waiting arms of heaven. Either way, none have ever gone in and come out. The old man laughed aloud. None but me, that is. Ha! Naruto stared at the old man. He was clearly a bit on the crazy side. So how did you escape? The old man smiled at Naruto. Well, you're the first person I've met in over 10 years out here. I'll tell you because this secret is too good not to be passed down. He chuckled softly. I used to teach at a school in a faraway land before the wanderlust took me. I wanted to see the world. I traveled for 20 years before I saw these mountains. My insatiable curiosity drove me to enter them. Suddenly the ground beneath me gave way. I managed to grasp onto the ledge of the cave I was about to fall into. The light that shone in showed me nothing but blackness. I pulled myself out and watched as the ground shook and the hole sealed shut. Naruto stared wide-eyed at the man. Was it a doorway to hell? Ha ha ha, the man laughed, then coughed. No, it was an underground cave that was exposed due to shifting tectonic plates. This edge of the world is a huge fault line. That sort of thing is very common. Oh, Naruto drooped his shoulders disappointedly. But what about the other part? Pathway to heaven? Ah. Well, after that I decided to be more careful of my movements. I took my time and climbed the mountain. I discovered something truly amazing. The path to the island in the sky. The old man erupted into bales of insane laughter. Naruto stared at him. Yup, crazy. The old man wiped away tears from his eyes. No, really. I stepped into a narrow gully and an incredible river of wind grabbed me. All of the world's wind starts from somewhere and goes to somewhere. That's the rules of nature. But I was unprepared. This here, the edge of the world, is where the wind goes. Ha ha. It picked up a few boulders too, and threw me up this gully. It was like a barrel of a gun. I was shot into the evening sky right into some clouds. Naruto stood up angrily and pointed at him. You're lying, old man. No one could live through that. I am not. I was blasted through a cloud. And what did I find? I didn't come crashing back down to earth, oh no. I was on an island in the sky. The density of these clouds is such that it is solid like land. The results of millions of years of wind and debris being flung into the atmosphere. There is dirt, boulders, even trees up there. You don't believe me? Go see for yourself. You're lying! How could that be? And how did you get back down? Naruto exclaimed in disbelief. Ha! I was trapped up there for months before I found it. If there is an updraft, there has to be a downdraft too. Imagine a river of wind that is constantly flowing down. This one is much gentler, thankfully. It was like sliding down. I landed not far from where I went up. Naruto scowled at the crazy old man. Even if I believe this, how did you survive up there that long? Kid, you're really starting to bug me. I told you it's always flowing. There are birds, animals that clearly had been thrown up there too. Some really rare ones too. There's water from rain that has collected into a small lake. There are clouds higher than that one. It's just like normal land, except it's an island in the sky. Naruto sat back down and studied the old trapper. The trapper handed Naruto a now cooked rabbit and took one for himself. My name is Livingston by the K. Naruto bit hungrily into the rabbit. I'm Naruto. Can you show me how to get to this island? Livingston chewed and laughed heartily. Kid, I'm old now. If I tried to make it back home, I'd die before I got there. I sense my time is close. I'm an explorer. But what good's an explorer if no one ever knew you were here, if you even existed? The old trapper cried. Showing you will validate my existence, kid. I'll take you tomorrow. Naruto nodded. He understood Livingston very well. There it is, kid. Livingston had barely made it up the hill they needed to climb to get to the wind channel he described. He was indeed very old and feeble. Truthfully, he needed Naruto to help him get even this far. With Naruto's help, it had taken them the better part of the day. Naruto looked around. This was a very hard place to find. The rocks were jagged and the terrain unforgiving. No one would willingly come along this path that looked like it led nowhere. Naruto could see it. Somehow he could feel the wind in this place, the extreme power it held. He wondered absently if he could ever match the power of such wind force. What do we do now? Naruto asked Livingston. Livingston laughed maniacally and for a feeble old man seemed to have gained a sudden burst of energy. Jump in the river, fool! With one last laugh, Livingston jumped into the gully and Naruto stared amazed as an unseen force lifted him and rocketed him through the gully, and up into the clouds covering the mountain ahead. Naruto shrugged and adjusted the strap on his satchel. He jumped in and felt the cushion of air as it caught him. It wasn't sudden, his fall slowed down, and then gradually he was pushed then rocketed towards the sky. He felt an exhilarating rush as the mountain sped past him. He saw in the Wind River a couple rabbits had been caught, and were spinning around madly. The sky loomed before him, and he was shot up into the clouds, riding the river of air. The river punched through the clouds and Naruto ended up on his backside sitting on a hard piece of cloud. Gotta work on that landing, kid. Livingston laughed at Naruto. Naruto stood up and looked amazed at his surroundings. They were standing on what had to be a large mass of clouds. It was white and seemed to be in the general cloud shape. But it was definitely solid ground. Naruto saw that Livingston was standing on what could only be described as a beach. Sand formed a ring around an actual island of dirt, trees, grass. It looked like perfectly normal land, except for the clouds that it was perched on. Naruto grinned and laughed. This was too amazing to be true. Livingston smiled at him and pointed to the sun. See over there, kid? By that oak tree? That's the point where you go down. I found a few other wind rivers, but they seem to go off into the distance around the world. I think this is the center of all wind in the world, kid. Where everything comes and goes. Livingston fell to his knees and clutched his chest. Where all things come at the end of things. Naruto leaped over to the old man and caught him before he fell backwards. I'm so glad fate had us meet, Naruto. I did not have the strength to come back to my beloved Sky Island myself. And I want to be buried here. My life was not always a pure one, but I want to be buried here. As close to heaven as I could possibly get. Livingston coughed and smiled at Naruto. Naruto had no idea what to do. He wasn't a Mednin. He just held on to Livingston while he breathed his last. The sunset from heaven is like nowhere else, kid. Don't miss it, okay? Naruto nodded and shed tears for the first person to show him kindness in months. He sat there, holding the slowly breathing Livingston until the sun set and his chest stopped moving. Naruto stood back from the marker he had just placed on the grave of Livingston and hoped it would be good enough. He had used his kunai to carve his name in a piece of wood he had found. Livingston, discoverer of heaven. Naruto sighed and turned back to the desolate island. His mind raced. I have nowhere to go, no one to go to. Nothing to guide my life. But I have a place where no one can ever find me. He stared at the sky, which really seemed much closer now, and wondered what his next step would be. A steady stream of rain began to beat down on him. I guess I can't sleep outside forever. I should probably build a shelter. Can't be living in Tengaku, heaven, and not have somewhere dry to sleep. Naruto stopped in his tracks. Tengaku. That's a good name for this place. With a shrug, Naruto set about making himself more comfortable in his new home. After a week in his new home, Naruto decided the place he built was as best as he could do with his limited skills. There were a lot more animals than he could have thought possible trapped on the Sky Island, so he had no trouble for food. Naruto did his best to map out the island in his head in that time. It was large, mostly even terrain. It did indeed look as though it had been here since the dawn of time. Naruto had also found many items that had been blown up by the wind. Things seemed to collect where the wind died down, on a small hill towards the center of the island. He had found several scrolls of a mostly useless nature, shoes, clothes, a wig, a few weapons he recognized like kunai and swords, and a few he didn't. Naruto even found money among the items. He smiled at his good fortune but realized he had nowhere to spend it, even if he wanted to. Naruto frowned. He didn't want to spend his whole life as a hermit. He needed a plan. He fiddled with the weapons he had found for himself while he looked across the island. Well, I'm a banished ninja. Maybe I can earn money doing ninja stuff? That's what Konoha does after all. He thought to himself. The question is, how do I start? Naruto had no idea how to proceed. But he did know one thing. Now he had a home to come back to, so things didn't seem so hopeless anymore. He would need to leave Tengaku for a while, but he'd come back for sure. Besides, he couldn't find any ramen in the wind heap. The following morning, Naruto packed up his satchel with kunai and food and headed out. He saw the tree that Livingston had pointed out and felt the air currents swirling around it. Naruto stepped into the stream and felt himself pulled down into the wind river. He felt the experience of flying down from the clouds, his body completely weightless as the wind rushed him at an angle to the ground. Naruto almost panicked at the speed that he was going, but the wind curved until he was running almost parallel with the ground, just 100 feet in the air. Naruto felt his feet brush the treetops and his heart raced with the exhilaration. The wind slowed down gradually, and he managed to jump out of the stream and land smoothly in a clearing. He grinned widely as he looked back where he came from. The cloud with Tengaku was so high up, and looked like any other cloud, completely hidden from the world. Naruto set out to make a life for himself, knowing he had a home to come back to. 3 days east of Tengaku, Naruto was walking across a vast savanna of low-lying grass, when he saw something in the distance. As he walked closer, it looked like a giant bird cage with a vulture in it. The closer he got to it, the more like a person the bird in it resembled. It was a man. Naruto came close to the cage after looking around to make sure no one was in the area. His ninja senses could detect no one. He peered into the cage. The man looked half dead. His face cracked and dry, his eyes closed. His black mane of hair was long and disheveled. He had on black clothes that had long been covered in dirt and grime. A trail of dried blood went down one arm. With a start, the man's eyes opened and he yawned. He glanced at Naruto. Came to finish me off, did you? I told your boss already that I will not tell him where the treasure I stole is, so he may as well give it up. I'll haunt him and kill him as a ghost, so do your worst. Naruto was too stunned to speak. He just took a step back. Well, come on. Aren't you going to? The man looked at Naruto properly, and then stood up in the cage, his hands gripping the bars. You're not one of Lecher's men, are you? He sounded almost pleading. No, Naruto replied. But maybe I should get going. Naruto didn't want to get caught up with the thief. He turned his back to go, but the man called out to him. Wait. Set me free, kid. I'm an innocent man wrongly being punished for a crime I didn't commit, the man said boldly. You just said you stole some treasure, Naruto replied dryly. Well, yes, but that's not a crime if the initial treasure was stolen to begin with, is it? The man grinned. Allow me to introduce myself. I am Senjai Mikado, the greatest swordsman in the world. Naruto stared at him dumbfounded. What a statement to make. The man nodded towards a nearby tree. See my sword over there? The bastards couldn't even be bothered to take it, make sure it's well kept. Just left it out here to rust. They also left you here to die, you know, Naruto stated incredulously. The man seemed more upset about his sword. I'd have gotten out, but it rained 3 nights ago and the sword need to be wiped down. This is an original Hattori Hanzo sword. It would dishonor me greatly if it were allowed to rust. Naruto nodded, he understood now. You're mad, aren't you? He turned to walk away. No, wait, kid! Wait! You appear before me, dressed all in white like an angel sent to save me. It must mean something. I truly am the greatest swordsman you will ever meet. If you do me this favor, I shall owe you my life. I will forever swear my sword is yours. Senji looked at Naruto and grinned widely and innocently. Naruto frowned. The man could be a liar and a thief. But Naruto couldn't just leave him here to die. Could he? As he thought about it, he heard the faint sound of hooves in the distance. Senji heard it too. They're coming back to finish me off, kid. Thanks, but you better get out of here for your own safety. Naruto was stunned at the difference in the man's voice and attitude. His voice had become steely and serious. Naruto's mind was made up in that instant, and he started to form a Rasengan, his shadow clone appearing next to him to help him complete it. A ninja, Senji said as he stepped away from the lock. Naruto slammed the Rasengan into the lock and it blew apart. Senji stepped out and fell shakily to his knees. If you're a ninja, paying back my life debt just got a hell of a lot more dangerous. He pushed himself to his feet and glared at the approaching horseman. Excellent, I hate when life gets boring. Do me a favor and let me deal with these guys? I owe them a little something. Senji lunged for his swords as an arrow whizzed by his head. The horsemen were upon them, and Naruto leapt away from the fight. He looked on from a nearby tree as Senji engaged the 6 riders. Senji grasped his sword and with a flick or his wrist sent the scabbard flying off the sword and towards the first rider. The point of it was clearly sharpened because it went through the man like a spear. 5 riders and 1 rider-less horse now bore down on him. He rolled to the side and parried a swing from one of the riders. With a sudden twirl, his body pivoted in midair. His sword was a blue blur as it sliced the air. Almost faster than Naruto could follow, Senji planted his foot on the ground and sprung back into the middle of his attackers. To them it probably did seem like he disappeared. In an instant Senji stood with his back to the riders, his scabbard back in his hands. He slowly slid his sword into it. As if on cue, the riders fell from their horses, spurts of blood spraying upwards. Naruto was actually impressed. The man was not just full of talk. He was indeed a good swordsman, at least the best he'd ever seen. Ah, Senji sighed. That felt good. Pay back, you punks. He looked around for Naruto. Hey kid, you got any sake? I haven't had anything to eat or drink in a week. Senji grinned widely and Naruto smiled back. Senji then promptly fell to his knees and collapsed in the dirt. Chapter 2 First Steps. Naruto prodded the fire with the stick in his hand. The distant howl of a coyote, the only other sound other than the crackling of the small campfire. He glanced across at the prone body of Senji, the swordsman he had set free yesterday. The man's face looked peaceful as he rolled in his sleep, both hands clutching his sheathed sword to his chest. Naruto frowned. Yesterday he would have hazarded a guess that Senji was an older man, but his face had seemed to drop years of worry when he got his sword back. He looked to be no older than 20, 25 maybe. A young swordsman with a very high level of skill, Naruto thought. Ah. Senji stretched out with a groan. That was a good nap. He glanced over at Naruto, his black eyes boring into Naruto's steel blue. So what's your name, my lord? Senji asked with a grin. Naruto's mouth dropped open. What? Well, I owe you my life, so my life is now yours. Senji smiled as he sat up and rubbed behind his head. His eyes closed as he chuckled. It's my honor at stake, you understand. Naruto blinked 3 times then shrugged. I'm Naruto. Uzumaki Naruto. Well then, my lord Naruto. Kenji stared at Naruto intently. Where are we going and what's the plan? Naruto looked back at Senji and grinned. He had been thinking about it ever since leaving his new home. Naruto had grown up alone and didn't want to spend his entire life that way. It was time to make a start. Well, I'm starting my own village. I plan to get jobs a ninja would get, and get the money I need to build my village. Senji stared at Naruto with his mouth open for a full minute. You're serious, aren't you, my lord? Naruto grinned nervously. I know it's a lot to do, but I think if we took it one step at a time we can do it. I never give up. That is my ninja way. Senji stood up and paced, pausing to glance at Naruto every now and then. Naruto seemed almost oblivious to this as he went about cooking dinner. Fate has certainly led me to an interesting companion, Senji muttered. My lord, he began. Naruto cut him off. Please call me Naruto? That my lord stuff just sounds weird. He made a face and went back to the task at hand. Okay, Senji sat back down with a thump. Your goals are amazing and worthy. I will dedicate myself to helping you achieve them. Naruto looked up and grinned. Thanks, Senji. Senji smiled back. So where are we going to build this village? 5 minutes later, Kenji come back. It's all true, I swear it. Naruto shouted at the angrily storming off samurai. Senji stalked into the forest, looking to sit alone and quietly for a while. My new lord is a madman. What a cruel fate to befall me, the best swordsman in the world. Konoha, Lee stood looking at the rising sun. For weeks now he had stared off in that direction, the direction his friend Naruto had been driven off into. No one had seen or heard from him since. Lee had tried talking to Sakura about it. Where would Naruto have gone? But she could barely form words to speak. She had cried for several days. Lee himself had cried, sorrowful tears of youth, he insisted. Such cruelty at the hands of the villagers they were sworn to protect. Lee could not understand it, could not believe it. Of course, the retribution of Naruto's friends had been swift. Tsunade had sent Heishi Hyuga to the hospital with a broken skull, ribs and spine. It was doubtful any of the medical ninja there could heal him. In fact, only Tsunade might have been able to, and she flat out laughed and refused. She had then teamed up with Jiraiya and found every ninja and villager who had run Naruto out of Konoha and beat them all within an inch of their lives. Kakashi had run into a few who were laughing at what they did the next day, and from the stories Lee heard, Kakashi's wrath was something to behold. The council had elected Danzo to be the new Hokage. Many had been disgusted with the politics, but the undercurrent of the village was that Tsunade had been too forgiving to the beast that was Naruto. Lee sighed as the sun shone glared at Konoha. It was his own imagination, he was sure, but it felt like the universe was judging them, and not in their favor. Tsunade, Shizune and Jiraiya had left the village. For good it seemed. Jiraiya had spit on his hometown and vowed he would not return. He set off looking for Naruto. No one knew where Tsunade had gone. Kakashi had been reprimanded. The new Hokage had sought to flex his influence over him. Kakashi smiled, pulled out his book, and threw his hayate to the ground at his feet. He had resigned as a Konoha ninja, choosing to go live quietly in his house and read his books. Lee stretched, preparing for his 5-lap warm-up jog around Konoha. He could not sit here and do nothing. What had happened was not fair. It was not right. He would talk to Sensei about it. Naruto stared at the city sprawled before them. It had taken a few days for them to reach the city. It was at least 3 times as big as Konoha, Naruto decided, and the towers seemed to be taller than any he'd ever seen. Naruto could see some huge boats coming into dock, their sails billowing in the wind. People hustled about oblivious to each other, focused intently on whatever purpose drove them today. Senji sighed. Welcome to Sarakiel. The city where anything can be found, bought, sold, stolen. The city of sin in the west. Naruto just nodded absently as they looked down from their vantage point on a hill on the outskirts of the city. Senji continued. If you want to earn money doing ninja jobs, this is the place to come. Lots of missing nin come here to vie for the freelance jobs that exist. But, Senji paused and smiled. You need to first prove yourself to the overlords that you can handle the jobs, and would be able to get them done. Naruto turned to look at Senji. How do you go about doing that? Easy, Senji replied. You enter the Kumite. You fight the best fighters from around the globe. Ninja, samurai, monks, street fighters. Everyone comes here just to prove themselves and make a name. The ones who get noticed get jobs. Simple. Naruto nodded. The first had explained to them that the Chunin exams were pretty much for the same reason. So this Naruto at least understood. Well then, I have a contest to sign up for. Naruto grinned at Senji, who smiled wickedly right back. Ladies and gentlemen, The ringmaster's voice boomed into the microphone. Naruto sat in the bleachers with 100-odd other fighters. Senjai himself had also signed up. Naruto had no idea the contest would be this soon, starting only the day after they arrived. But he was glad he didn't have to wait long. He tugged at his white shirt and sighed. He missed his orange. Welcome to the Kumite. Drums sounded all along the grounds as 30 drummers with rope tied around their heads and drums strapped to their shirtless bodies pounded out a fast rhythm. The crowd in the stadium went wild. The Kumite was big business to Sarakiel apparently. Thousands of people filled the stadium to look at the action. You all know why you're here. To see who is the best. Our reigning champ? Is he the best? Is it Jiraiya? The announcer dragged out that last name to thundering screams and applause from the crowd. A huge hulk of a man stood up from the bleachers and waved at them. His entire head was wrapped in a mask. Naruto swallowed hard. The man's biceps were bigger than Naruto's head. He really hoped he didn't have to fight him just yet. Without further ado, our first matchup for the day is. And so the matches began. Naruto looked on in amazement as the first few matches went on. These fights were not child's play. There was no referee. There was no draw or conceding. You fought until someone was either dead or knocked out. Those were the rules. Naruto frowned at the brutality of it all, but a part of him relished the idea of beating someone to a pulp. Naruto realized he had a lot of anger pent up, and this would be the first fight he would have had since he got run out of Konoha. Next up, Naruto Uzumaki vs. Paul Laureate. Naruto walked into the center of the ring and waited for his opponent to arrive. A Caucasian man who had a funny spring in his step. Fight! The announcer shouted. Naruto blocked as his opponent kicked at his head in the blink of an eye. Naruto was shocked at the man's speed. He was easily as fast as Rock Lee. Before he had time to think, Naruto was swept off his feet by a spinning ground sweep. Laureate kept the momentum of the spin and brought his other leg sweeping around to catch Naruto in mid-air. It connected with a satisfying thud, but to everyone's surprise, Naruto just vanished in a puff of smoke. From the ground, Naruto launched himself at Laureate. Unfortunately for Naruto, this was no Chunin match. Laureate saw him coming and stepped back just enough to avoid the uppercut. He then spun and kicked the real Naruto flying. Naruto landed with a thump in the dust to the cheering of the crowd. Naruto recovered quickly and quickly formed the seals he needed. Kage Bunshin. With a loud puff, 100 clones covered the arena floor. Laureate looked puzzled for a second, then smiled acknowledgement at Naruto. With a nod, Naruto's clones and Laureate launched at each other. What happened next was a blur of dust, blood and puffs of smoke. But in the end, Naruto was down to only 12 clones, and Laureate lay unconscious in the dust. Winner! Naruto Uzumaki! The crowd cheered for Naruto. He smiled and wiped the dust from his eyes. Something about thousands of people cheering you on a few months after an entire village tried to kill you and banish you. It just seemed to soothe Naruto. Sanji's fight was next, and it astonished Naruto how quickly it went. Sanji had just appeared behind his opponent in a red flash. He was putting his sword away as blood spurted out of his opponent. Seriously wounded but not dead, Sanji explained. There was no honor in killing for no reason. Naruto grinned. His new friend was a great fighter, and a decent person. Something Naruto had come to value. He made a mental note to ask Sanji how he moved so fast later that night. Just as the sun was setting and Naruto was thinking all the matches for the day were done, the stadium lit up with fire from hundreds of torches. Sanji, who was sitting next to him, leaned in and explained. There is no rest, no sleep. We fight until only one is left standing. Naruto nodded. Naruto Uzumaki vs. Romero Aguila. Naruto moved to the center of the ring and looked on as a man with a metal mask over the front of his face and two short swords in his hands leapt all the way from the bleachers to the center of the ring. Naruto whistled. That was a good jump. Fight. Naruto wasted no time this time around, and attacked first. He launched a series of kicks and punches that were all easily dodged by Romero. Romero shrieked like a girl and Naruto could see the two short swords swinging. They put two shallow cuts on his forearms. He drew back and contemplated his next move. Those swords would be a problem. Romero shrieked again and dove at Naruto's swords first, twisting in mid-air to simulate a corkscrew. Naruto rolled to the side and came up with two clones on either side of him. One clone rushed in to fight and distract Romero, while Naruto and his other clone formed a Rasengan. Sanjay watched in fascination for the second time as Naruto created his ultimate jutsu. Once it was complete, the other clone leapt into the battle. So the clones were attacking from left and right, while Naruto lunged down the middle. The tactic partially worked. Romero took the Rasengan to high midsection and went flying backwards, but he seemed to be twisting with the movement, and ended up controlling the impact of it. Romero landed on his feet at the edge of the ring. With a shriek he jumped back in the air, high above Naruto, arcing down, his legs preparing for a final kick on Naruto. Naruto was stunned. No one had ever been able to take a Rasengan and shrug it off. He rolled to the side again and in desperation threw a brace of kunai at Romero. Romero knocked them all away, left, right, up, with his swords and kept coming after Naruto, slicing right into him. With a puff of smoke, the last visible Naruto in the ring vanished. Romero looked to the ground again, waiting for Naruto to spring out of it. His eyes darting left and right, head tilted down, he did not see the last kunai he had parried into the air come hurting back down to him. Nor did he see when it changed back into Naruto and kicked him at the base of his skull. Winner Naruto Uzumaki. Sanjay smiled and shook his head sadly at the same time as Naruto, exhausted, took his seat next to him. You very clever Naruto. But cleverness will only get you so far. You must become stronger if you want to form your own village. Naruto's eyes glared at Sanjay. He wanted to be mad, but he couldn't. He could see the logic of what he was saying. Aren't you ninjas supposed to have an affinity? I've encountered some of you before and usually you have a specialty. Fire, water, ice. I've seen many versions of this. But you've not shown anything like that. Sanjay's eyes casually took in the next match while he was talking to Naruto. I don't know if I have an affinity. Naruto responded. Sensei never really spoke to us about it. Now that he thought about it, Naruto realized that Sanjay was right. Sasuke had been able to use lightning jutsu, so clearly he had a lightning affinity. Naruto wondered absent-mindedly how he'd find out if he had any leanings towards a certain type. Sanjay, as if reading his thoughts, muttered to him. In battle we always find new strengths. Try something new and see if it works out for you. If not, well then. Sanjay laughed a little. Then you'll just lose. Naruto stared straight ahead, ignoring the small laughter. I do not lose. Sanjay had progressed again, defeating a nunchuki user in what was a surprisingly long bout. Well, long for Sanjay as it took over 30 seconds. During the last hour of fighting, thought Naruto had been sitting with his eyes closed, forehead furrowed in concentration. It wasn't often that Naruto could sit quiet for so long and think. Naruto Uzumaki vs. Leopard. Naruto opened his eyes and walked into the center, the night breeze blowing coolly against his skin. He looked up and saw a gust pick up leaves and sweep them around. Naruto's eyes opened wide, and he looked back down to his opponent. A grin spread across his face. Worth a shot, right? He leaped into the ring and landed in a small puff of dust. Anticipation coursed through Naruto. He was about to try something new, and that always got his juices flowing. Leopard was a wiry man, with markings on his bronze body that resembled the great cat he was named after. His back was arched forward and his limbs looked a bit longer than they should have. Naruto's eyes assessed his opponent. Well, he does look the part. Fight. The MC commanded and stepped away. Leopard did not advance, he instead growled quietly and walked sideways, sizing up Naruto. Your little parlor tricks will do you no good here, ninja. A low guttural voice spoke. Leopard seemed to want to talk before he fought. My style is unbeatable, especially for a kid such as yourself. Naruto grinned. After enduring lectures from Sasuke and Neji on how inferior he was, this guy's words had absolutely no effect on him. Naruto cracked his neck, then rushed in. He lunged at the man, pulling out a kunai as he ran. Leopard sprang towards him, baring his sharpened teeth and holding his fingers like claws. Naruto threw a punch that was neatly blocked. A slash from Leopard raised Naruto's arm and he swiveled to try a kick. He found his leg caught in midair and he was thrown high up. Leopard jumped up to kick him, but Naruto formed a Kage Bunshin in midair that pulled him out of the way. Naruto landed a few feet away as Leopard came back down. In that pause in time before Leopard landed and would be able to attack again, Naruto decided he was going to try his idea. He put both hands palm forward, keeping his elbows at his side, and drew as much chakra as he could to them. It all happened in a split second. Leopard landed. Naruto pushed his hands forward, trying to force the chakra out of his palms. Leopard looked wide-eyed as something hit him in the midsection. A blast of pure energy had exploded out of Naruto's palms, in the shape of a large, ever-expanding wave. It radiated outwards, moving swiftly out and away from Naruto. He stood there in shock as he saw Leopard flung backwards an impossible distance. But more than that, was that the shockwave didn't slow down. As it hit the stands where spectators and fighters alike were sitting, there was a sharp cracking of stone and splintering of wood. The stands blew up like a stack of toothpicks, debris and dust flying everywhere. Naruto could see some fighters and even a few spectators had leaped clear of the blast, but most hadn't. Naruto fell to his knees, breathing heavily. Okay, too much chakra in that one, and I don't think it took the form of wind like I wanted. Pandemonium reigned for a few minutes as people struggled to free themselves from the broken seating. Naruto sat in the ring, looking worried. He really hoped no one had been hurt. Senji just sat in the good section of the stands and looked thoughtful. Naruto had in one move destroyed a quarter of the stadium. Senji smiled at the thought that his new leader was that powerful, but he frowned when he realized he was that powerful but had no idea how to control it. That blast was clearly not intentional. It was just raw power. Senji made up his mind to ask a friend of his to come help train Naruto. It was a long shot, and the man hated ninja, but it was all he could think of at the moment. The announcer nodded at his staff and walked back to the center of the ring. He looked incredulously at this young man who had so easily. He cleared his throat. Ladies and gentlemen, the winner of this match is Naruto Uzumaki. A great roar of approval and cheering went up from the remaining crowd. Naruto was a bit stunned. People were still climbing out of the ruins, but these people didn't seem to care. I guess it's that kind of place, every man for himself. Also, since we need to clear the area of bystanders, debris and a few bodies probably. Naruto shuddered at that. Had he hurt anyone? The matches are suspended for 1 day. The MC looked down at Naruto. Kid, can you try not to damage any more of my property when we resume? He grinned widely. You're not upset? Naruto asked. Hell no. When people hear about what just happened, I'll have more patrons at the continuation of the Kumite. It's good for business to have insane levels of power and fighting, it's what the people want to see. He snapped his fingers, and Naruto saw a large guy pick up Leopard and fling him over his shoulder. He walked off to where Naruto knew the infirmary was. Hey Naruto! Senji called out. You hungry? Wow! Senji whistled low. You sure can put those away. He gestured to the empty bowls of ramen. Naruto smiled as he slurped down his 10th bowl. Well, it's not as good as Ichiraku's, but it's pretty good all the same. And I haven't had ramen in a while. A few patrons in the ramen bar were looking at Naruto and whispering. Senji chuckled. Well, I'd say you've succeeded in making a name for yourself. Every man, woman and child within miles of here now know your name, and that you can single-handedly wipe out an army if you wished. Naruto almost choked. An army? It was just a jutsu that I tried on the spot. It's not exactly. Not exactly what? Senji smiled. Complete? Yeah, I could see that. But damn if it wasn't horribly powerful. Naruto frowned into his bowl of ramen. It wasn't anything like I wanted. I was trying to use wind jutsu. I just wanted a gust of wind to blow him away. Senji laughed aloud. I'd say the effect was the same. But you're right, that wasn't wind. That was pure energy. With a sigh, Senji continued. Listen, I have a friend who knows about ninjutsu arts. He's not a ninja, mind you, just a very knowledgeable person. I think we should go talk to him when you're done eating. He could probably point you in the right direction. Naruto's eyes lit up, and he tilted the bowl back and drank it all in one gulp. Done. Let's go. We only have 1 day before the fights start back. Senji called out. Old man. You still alive in there? Naruto looked down as Senji banged on an old wooden door. A walled-off compound with stone carvings of elephants, and strange-looking people with 4 or more arms adorned the pillars around the door. Senji? Is that you? A voice from within the compound replied. Senji grinned. Yeah, it's M. Before Naruto could blink, the doors were opened and a fist had knocked Senji to his back on the ground. A grizzled old man, with dark tan skin, stared down at Senji. a glare on his face, his robes fluttering in the wind. I guess you're still mad about the thing with your daughter, Senji said from the ground, not trying to get up. Mad? If you were not my brother's student at one time, you'd be dead right now. My only daughter. Senji grinned. I guess I'm lucky. If she was here, she'd have killed me herself. You certainly picked the wrong woman to leave at the altar. The old man nodded. His face softened, and he extended his hand to Senji to help him up. Even if I do understand the reasons, she's still me daughter. You understand? Senji smiled sadly and nodded. Naruto made a mental note to ask about that exchange later. Naruto, Senji turned to him and smiled. This is Sensei Tenchi Shiratori. Senji turned to Tenchi. Old man, this is Naruto Uzumaki. My new nakama. And the man I've sworn allegiance to for saving my life. Tenchi looked between the two. Sworn allegiances are not to be taken lightly. But neither is a life debt. I hope you honor it properly, Senji. He turned to look at Naruto, sizing him up. So you're Jiraiya's student's son? Naruto's jaw dropped. Senji did a double take. What? Naruto asked. Jiraiya's student? Tenchi nodded. The fourth leader of your village, Minato something or the other. I met him once when he was traveling with Jiraiya. He had to be your age, I guess. You look exactly like him. So unless you are him, and have learned an age-defying, death-defying jutsu, you're his son. Naruto rocked back. His mind couldn't process any of this. Tenchi looked at him, and seemed to make up his mind about something. Okay, come inside. We will talk away from the prying eyes and ears of the street. Old man, Naruto here needs to learn to control his power. He's obliterated a quarter of the stadium today, Senji said with a chuckle. You should have seen it. Tenchi, with his back to them, was making some tea on the stove. The quiet trickle of water from the garden was a sharp contrast to the fighting they had seen just a few hours ago. I didn't need to see it, I felt it. Tenchi turned back and brought the tea tray and rested it down before Naruto and Sanji. Ah, no sake? Senji groaned. Tenchi squinted and backhanded Senji across the face. Senji flew across the garden and landed underneath a small fountain. No alcohol in my house, Tenchi said calmly. You know that. He turned back to Naruto. So what questions do you have for me? Naruto grasped the teacup in his hands, threatening to shatter it with his grip. He had so many questions. My father was the fourth, was all he could manage to say. Tenchi cocked his head to the side. So they didn't tell you? Odd. He's a hero known to many around the world. He shrugged. Doesn't matter much though, does it? You are who you are regardless of parentage. Naruto looked up incredulously at him. Doesn't matter? I had a father who was a hero. But then why? Naruto's hand subconsciously touched the seal on his stomach. Why would he do this? Tenchi's eyes grew very serious, and he stared at Naruto. With a start, his eyes snapped wide. You're that Naruto? The vessel. Naruto nodded ashamed. Tenchi grinned and came at Naruto. Thank you. Every day you save so many lives, it is an honor to have you in my house. Tenchi grasped Naruto and gave him a bear hug, squeezing him tightly. Naruto had never met with this reaction before. Most people were scared of him. You're welcome? But how come? How come I'm not scared? Because I know about the seal and what it does. I know how hard it must be to maintain it, the effort, and the sacrifice you must go through. Not many could handle that responsibility. You are saving the world every day. Countless lives could be lost in a blink of an eye if your prisoner was to escape. Tenchi sighed and looked to where Senji was getting out of the fountain. His father was killed by the demon, you know. Naruto looked stricken. He saw a wet, smiling Senji approach and was scared. When he found out he would shun him like everyone else, the one friend he had made since leaving Konoha. Senji, this is Uzumaki Naruto of Konoha, the jailer of the demon fox, Tenchi said matter-of-factly. Senji stopped in his tracks and his eyes grew steely. Naruto saw a range of emotion cross his face. Sadness, anger, hurt. He wondered what Senji would say. Naruto, you keep that blasted fox locked up? Senji asked slowly. Naruto nodded, afraid of the outcome of this discussion. Senji looked at him, then got down on one knee. He drew out his sword and extended it across his palms at Naruto. The oath I took once is not strong enough. My debt to you will never be repaid. My sword, my life, is yours. I shall protect you for eternity, this life and the next. On my word as a samurai, on my soul. I do swear it. Senji had tears streaming down his face as he spoke. Naruto did not know what to say. Senji got up abruptly and walked off, around the corner of the garden for some privacy. Tenji looked sadly at him go. I hope you understand how much that boy will do for you now. His parents and baby sister were slaughtered by that fox when he was not more than 5 years old. He survived on pure luck. He hates the demon, but he knows there is no way to kill it. So how can I help you, Naruto? Ask anything of me. Naruto looked into his tea. He forced all the thoughts about the demon, his father and Konoha to the back of his mind. I need to learn what my affinity is, and I want to get stronger. Strong enough to build my own village. A village where no one is persecuted or hated. Where everyone can live together in peace. Tenchi sat down and sipped his tea. You certainly dream big. I can help you with the first part easy enough. That tree over there is fed chakra, or chi, so just pick a leaf and hold it in your hands. It will tell you what your affinity is. Naruto got up and walked towards the oddly pale brown tree, which stood out in the lush garden of greens and flowers. He pulled a leaf off and held it. He turned to show Tenchi. The leaf had split in two. Wind, Tenchi said simply. Naruto stared at the leaf. My affinity is wind, and I found a place to live hidden in the clouds, accessible only by wind. The gods might not hate me that much after all. So now you need to understand what wind can do. Tenchi rose up and gestured for Naruto to follow him. They walked into his house, and into a large training room. This is a chakra room. The walls cannot be damaged by any form of chakra. The wood is made from that tree you saw outside. So fire, water, wind, it doesn't matter what is directed at the walls, roof or floor, no damage will be done. Tenchi walked to a wall and pulled down a sword from a rack of weapons. I don't know how it's taught in Konoha, but in my clan, chi skills are taught with a weapon. Tenchi threw the sword for Naruto to grasp. He took one look at how Naruto held the sword and took it back. Nope, clearly not a sword user. He turned back to the wall and pulled down some nunchaku, with the same result. Naruto spoke up. But I've never used these before, couldn't I learn? Tenchi did not turn to look at him while he was picking the next weapon. I have no time to teach you to use something you are not born to use. Everyone has one weapon, one style that fits them perfectly. It would be easy, flowing, for you to learn to use that. He picked up a wooden staff and threw it at Naruto. Naruto caught it easily and held it at his side. Tenchi squinted his eyes. Okay, you're a bow staff user. Naruto felt the staff in his hand. It did actually feel pretty natural. The hard oak staff was slightly longer than he was, but it felt perfectly balanced in his hands. Tenchi smiled. This makes things easier. The basics of Bojutsu is that it's very similar to hand-to-hand combat. So the moves can apply to unarmed as well as armed combat. I've no time to train you on the art, but I can show you how to channel your chakra into wind. The rest is up to you. If you survive the Kumite, and I'm more sure of that now than anything else, then you will come here for me to train you in Bojutsu for exactly 6 months. Is that clear? Naruto frowned, but nodded. 6 months was a long time to postpone his plans. As if reading his thoughts, Tenchi shook his head. Your goals are admirable, but until you're stronger you cannot attain them. You must see the logic in this. Naruto sighed, and gave in. Tenchi was right. Naruto needed to become strong enough to be Kage of his own village. He was nowhere near that level now. By the way, I didn't even ask, where do you want to build this village you dream of? Tenchi asked as he guided Naruto to the center of the dojo. 5 hours later, Naruto still swung the bow. His hands would have blistered already if he didn't have the healing power of the Kyuubi. Tenchi watched him sweat and work. So Naruto had found Livingston and the island in the sky. Tenchi had met the man once and liked him. A sincere human being. A faith in a place that no one else believed in. Tenchi had much to think about as Naruto built up the chakra in his staff and swung it, releasing a burst of wind. Senji sat in a corner and watched on in satisfaction, proud of his association with Naruto. Chapter 3 Wind. Naruto and Senji took their seats in the stands allocated for the fighters. The previous day no one had paid Naruto any attention. Today was a different day. All eyes were on his, some angry, some curious, others delighted. It was the delighted ones that worried Naruto. He saw the face of one particular fighter whose eyes were locked on his mouth open in a feral grin, salivating. That one seemed to be trembling with excitement at the thought of fighting Naruto. Naruto swallowed hard. It was the reigning champ who was staring at him. They sat down and looked around the stadium. The master of ceremonies had been right. Far from being emptier, the stadium was more packed. Every seat was filled, and the area where Naruto destroyed the day before had been replaced with makeshift bleachers that strained under the weight of hundreds of people. "Ladies and gentlemen, we continue the Kumite!" the MC screamed, to the delight of the fans. Naruto held tightly onto the bow's staff in his right hand, base resting just on the outside of his right foot. He tried his best to remain calm, but this was just too exciting. He had a new technique to try out in actual combat. Naruto couldn't wait. If this worked, he'd be on his way to getting stronger, strong enough to fulfill his dream. 2 hours later, Naruto versus Victor Karas, the MC shouted. The crowd was immediately in an uproar. Many people had come hoping to catch a glimpse of the power they had heard about or seen already yesterday. Naruto's opponent walked into the middle of the arena and waited. Naruto sighed and clenched his fist around the bow's staff. He rose and bent his knees. He sprang from the bleachers into his starting position in the middle of the field. A small circle of dust surrounded him. Naruto held onto his bow, pointing straight up and resting on the ground next to him like a pole. He breathed in and out deeply, preparing his chakra. "Fight!" the MC shouted, then ran off the field, clearly not wanting to get caught in any kind of backlash. Victor Karas was a middle-aged man with scars over most of his body. He had clearly seen years of battle. He sneered at Naruto. "What you going to do with that stick, boy?" He drew a sword from his waist. "I'm going to slice that toothpick, then peel the skin off your bones." Naruto smiled. At least he didn't have to worry about hurting a good guy. He lifted the bow and held it across his body, palms extended. Victor charged at him, but Naruto wasn't playing. He wanted to use this move immediately, couldn't hold the chakra build up in anymore. He brought his foot forward and pushed his right hand forward quickly, flicking the bow towards Victor. Victor Karas, even though he was still a good 20 feet away from Naruto, felt as if someone had hit a sledgehammer into his side. He went sprawling into the sand. He got up and spit out a bloody tooth. He grinned. "Is that the best you got?" He laughed. Naruto looked puzzled, then smiled. "No. I was just getting into position." Victor stopped laughing. The crowd was deathly silent, waiting. Naruto gathered his chakra and exhaled, feeding it into his hands and then the bow. He raised it and jumped forward, landing in a crouch. Naruto brought the bow down in a sharp swing, slamming the end into the dirt. "Tenshi Sarakiel," he shouted. An arc of wind followed the path of the bow, shooting like a shark's fin along the ground unbelievably fast towards Victor Karas. He had no time to jump out of the way. The wind hit him full on, and he stood there taking it at first. The wind shredded his clothes, flung his hair back and spread-eagled his arms. He screamed into the maelstrom as his grip on the ground couldn't hold anymore, and he was flung backwards. He hit the wall of the stadium, and the wind kept battering him. There was a sharp crack and a huge gully was etched into the stone wall of the stadium where the wind hit it. In a matter of seconds it was over. Victor Karas fell in a heap to the ground. The section of the stadium that was hit creaked loudly, then split in two, the left half sliding sideways slightly. Naruto stood up and grinned. It had worked perfectly. He could hear Senji shouting from the stands. "That's right. That's how we do it. Woo-hoo! Go Naruto!" The stadium erupted in applause. "Winner! Naruto!" As Naruto took his seat next to a smiling Senji, he saw several people approach them. Senji stopped them with his eyes and put out his palm. They nodded at him, and one by one, pieces of paper were slipped into his hand. They then turned and left. Naruto looked at him puzzled, and he whispered in response. "Jobs. You've proven yourself more than enough to get the interest of several people who want jobs done. So we go through their requests and see what you want to do." Naruto looked excited. "But I thought I had to win for people to notice?" Senji laughed. "Naruto, in 2 strokes you destroyed your opponent and cut the stadium in half. I think people will notice you. People far and wide will notice you." Naruto's eyes glazed over for a second, a million thoughts going through his head. Would Konoha find out? Would they be proud or would they hunt him down? Would his friends even care? Senjiai's next fight was against a fellow swordsman. It was a majestic sight, more like a dance than anything else. His opponent's face was mostly covered except for his eyes. A long red scarf flowing behind him as their swords clashed in the sunlight. Senjiai's black suit was looking the worse for wears the fight wore on, slices appearing in the material. Of course his opponent had them as well, with small cuts and drops of blood for good measure. After 15 minutes of this, the MC's voice cut in. 15 minutes. Would the combatants like the option of Anshitsu? The two swordsmen stopped and stepped away from each other. They both nodded. In a flash, the scarfed opponent had pushed his scarf up over his eyes, tying it tightly. Senjiai had pulled out a kerchief and did the same, effectively blinding himself. Naruto's mouth dropped open. What was he doing? But he could see Senjiai's feral grin as he grasped his swords tightly and crouched. Anshitsu means dark room, so they'd be fighting blind, Naruto guessed. The crowd became hushed to the point where you could hear the gravel shifting under the fighters' feet. Senjiai and his opponent Murasaki, something Naruto remembered, slowly circled each other. In a flash, they rushed each other, and like before the swords clashed, the ringing of cold steel sending shivers down Naruto's spine. It took a few more minutes, but Naruto could see Senjiai was getting the upper hand, the cuts on his opponent were getting bigger, while Murasaki was scoring less hits on Senjiai. There was a quick series of clashes, then it was over. Murasaki had leapt back several feet, clutching his left arm. Blood oozed between his fingers from where Senjiai's sword had slashed him. Senjiai stood back and smiled contentedly. Murasaki raised his hand and gave a signal to the MC. He had forfeited. Winner, Senjiai the Dark Blade. Naruto grinned. His friend had a very cool nickname. He watched as Senjiai walked over to the MC and spoke to him. The MC nodded and spoke again. Due to damage inflicted in this match, fighter Senjiai will not continue in the Kumite. The crowd seemed slightly disappointed. Senjiai walked over to where Naruto was and sat down. Naruto turned on him. Why did you drop out? You were winning every match. Senjiai turned to look at him with a tired smile. Well, I don't know if you noticed, but there are only 4 of us left. Which means I'd have to fight you in a few minutes. I could probably hold my own for a while, but I really don't want to be on the receiving end of your wind strike. We've got several jobs lined up and I need to recover if we want to do them. Naruto nodded. His friend was very practical. That was good, Naruto thought, because I'm very impulsive. Would my unpredictability slow me down in being a good leader? From starting my own village? Naruto shook his head. Now was not the time for such thoughts. With Senjiai out of the fight, that just left the reigning champ Guerrera and his opponent, a small man who used a weird animal-style martial art that Naruto had seen before, but not to this extent. Naruto had only one word to describe the match. Brutal. Guerrera was the fastest person Naruto had ever seen, despite his huge size. He practically rammed into his opponent. As the man was about to fall backwards though, Guerrera had grabbed his arms and thrown him into the air. He had then leapt into the air and somehow gotten the man's arms behind his back, and his legs hooked. They came crashing down to earth, the small man underneath pushing Guerrera. They landed with a sickening crunch. The masked champion got up and walked away, not even looking back. Winner Guerrera, the MC articulated. We will break for 5 minutes, then the final match will begin. Naruto vs. Guerrera. Naruto felt the nervous energy build up inside him. He'd soon be fighting for his life against a much stronger opponent. He smiled and turned to a similarly smiling Senjiai. I feel so alive right now. Senjiai nodded at his friend, leader, and kindred spirit. Naruto stood in the middle of the arena, looking at how huge Guerrera was. His hand tightened on his bow staff. Fight. No sooner had the MC shouted those words and moved out of the way had Guerrera catapulted his huge mass towards Naruto. Honestly, if Naruto hadn't been expecting it, he would have been bowled over. Unfortunately for Guerrera, he had been expecting it, so all Guerrera hit was a shadow clone. It vanished in a puff of smoke. 4 Narutos erupted from the ground around where Guerrera stood. Guerrera growled and brought his hands together with a loud clap. Naruto's eyes bulged as he saw familiar signs being formed, although with slight differences. Lion, bear, boar, was that an ox? With a grunt, Guerrera doubled in size. He went from a towering 7 feet tall to a massive 14-foot giant. His muscles seemed to take on a harder quality. Naruto's eyes squinted. The man looked slightly armored at this point. He could see why he was feared. The 4 Naruto clones took their position and raised their staffs. As one, they all performed the same move as before. Tenshi Sudaraku, they shouted in unison. 4 staffs slamming into the ground. 4 arcs of air racing to Guerrera. The masked fighter jumped impossibly high, straight up. He avoided all 4 blasts and landed back where he began. The Narutos frowned and prepared for another move, when Guerrera blasted his way towards one of them. With the smash of a giant fist, one clone dissipated. Naruto began the move for another Tenshi Sudaraku, but before he could take the first step, the other 3 clones were destroyed and Guerrera was behind him. You move too slowly, young one. Naruto swung the bow, but too late. He was backhanded across the face. Naruto spun madly around a few times before landing in a heap not far away. He blinked his eyes open, thinking he never felt a punch like that before. He looked around. His bow was by the feet of Guerrera. With a smirk, the fighter stepped on it and smashed it in 2. Naruto stood up slowly, his face becoming a mask of rage. That bow was a gift. Anyone looking closely would have seen his pupils become slits and his whiskers become deeper. What everyone did notice, however, was the waves of killing intent rolling off of Naruto. The spectators became silent as the anger became palpable. Even Kenji shuddered at the foul feeling he could practically taste coming from Naruto. Guerrera felt it too, and a smile split his face. Finally, you're getting serious. Come, little one, show me what you can do. Naruto growled and charged his speed much faster than before. A white blur closed the distance between the two. Guerrera's eyes opened wider behind his mask. Naruto's punch connected with his gut, the force of the charge, plus his QB-enhanced chakra sending Guerrera flying. Before he could land, Naruto was under him on all fours. With a growl, Naruto kicked him skyward. He leapt upwards to catch Guerrera in mid-air. In a blink of an eye, though, the masked fighter had twisted and grabbed Naruto in a body lock. It felt like a vice to Naruto, who struggled to break free. Foolish. Grappling is my art. I hope you survived this. You fought well. Guerrera twisted Naruto and himself so that he was in a sitting position in mid-air and Naruto's head was between his legs. They began to spin madly as they plummeted towards Earth. Naruto panicked. This felt very much like Lee's lotus, and he didn't want to feel that impact. He struggled against the hard muscles of Guerrera, his QB chakra pushing his body its limit. He started to feel his grip loosening, but too late. Wish a crash, Guerrera planted Naruto head first into the ground below. There was a collective wince from the crowd, followed by rousing cheers and jeers for the reigning champion. The MC walked over to where Naruto lay and Guerrera stood over him. Naruto was out cold, a small trickle of blood running down his nose. He was still breathing though, so the MC nodded at Guerrera. Ladies and gentlemen, the winner of this Kumite, Guerrera. The crowd roared its approval, while Senjai rushed out to the middle of the arena to collect Naruto. 1 month later, Jiraiya drank his sake quietly at the end of the bar. His expression kept most people away from him. The 1 or 2 who had ventured close enough to bother him had felt the brunt of his bad mood. He had seen nor heard no trace of Naruto for months. He had left Konoha so far behind that most people in these areas had never even heard of the Fire Country. Jiraiya had no more interest in the loose women he had before, no more time for frivolities. Life had lost its taste and bitterness had taken hold. His charge, the only living relative of his student, the boy he had begun to train, had been run out of his home. Jiraiya scowled. If only he could find him, he could take care of him, raise him properly. That Naruto sure was powerful though, those wind attacks were really something. Jiraiya almost choked on his sake as bits of conversation from down the bar floated towards him. Yeah, too bad he had to face that giant Guerrera in the finals. I think he would have won against anyone else. One of the 2 men talking replied. Jiraiya moved towards them unnoticed. No one can defeat Guerrera. It's impossible. That kid though sure was something. I'd hate to go up against him in a fight myself. Jiraiya stood behind both men and clamped his hands down on the back of their necks. A genuine smile crossed his face. His first clue. Gentlemen, I believe we should have a talk over some sake. Naruto eyed the small stone flying through the air, his eyes narrowing to slits to focus on it. Kaze-saban. he said as he sent a single needle of wind racing towards the stone. Not for the first time, he missed completely. Tenchi looked on with severe disapproval on his face. You must focus on the object harder, Naruto. Finesse comes with much practice. Naruto scowled. I've never thrown a real saban before. So how am I supposed to throw a wind one? I've only ever thrown kunhai. Tenchi looked down at Naruto and shook his head. Naruto, you relied too much on your staff in your match with Guerrera. What if you are disarmed? You need to be able to create your own weapons with your hands and wind chakra. The easiest one to start with is saban. If you can't even make this work, we can go no further. With that he turned and walked away from Naruto, leaving him looking at his new sensei's back. Naruto walked over to the pile of rocks and picked up a handful. He threw them in the air and formed the wind needles and threw them again. Missed. Again. Jiraiya looked on from the shadows as Naruto tried again to hit the stones. His face was serious as he considered several options. Naruto had found a new teacher. Granted, the man was not a shinobi, but he could not have found a better substitute. It has been long since you graced my house, Sannin. Tenchi stepped out of the shadows behind Jiraiya. Jiraiya did not turn around. How is he doing, Tenchi? He asked with genuine concern in his voice. He watched Naruto struggling with the senbon, determination in his eyes. Tenchi rubbed his chin and sighed. He's a brave young man. He has a lot of heart, Jiraiya, and he has a goal. He fights and strives to reach that goal. I think he will go very far. Jiraiya shook his head. You know what I meant. He's at a crossroads. He could go either way. Who he becomes will depend greatly on the 6 months, I think. I would like to be involved in his training. Jiraiya spoke up. There are some jutsu of Minato's he should learn, as his birthright. Tenchi nodded. Whenever you are ready to introduce yourself, do it. But I'd rather you wait until he finishes his exercises for today. I think he's finally starting to focus. They watched as Naruto hit 3 stones with wind needles, splintering them into dust. He let out a whoop and jumped around celebrating. Jiraiya smiled sadly. So much spirit for someone banished from his home, so much heart. Sakura stared at the gates of Konoha. Everyone else thought Sanada had left weeks ago, but there she was, her duffel bag slung over her shoulder, Shizen walking behind her. They had disappeared, but clearly hadn't left as yet. On an impulse, Sakura ran towards her. Tsunade had come because of Naruto, she shouted at herself in her head. She too believed in him. Mr. Tsunade! Please wait! Sakura shouted as she ran up to them. Tsunade turned to face her, her face softening as she looked at Sakura. She knew Naruto had a crush on this girl, that they had been friends and teammates. She cursed inwardly though, if only she had left weeks ago, but she needed the research papers she had found, and some items she wanted that were hidden away. If she ever saw Naruto again. Sakura? She asked with just that name. Tsunade, I have a request. Please? Sakura's eyes welled up with tears. She closed them hard and sought the courage. Please take me with you. Tsunade rocked back on her heels with surprise. What? Why would you want to come with me? Sakura sobbed. I'm weak. I've lost 2 teammates, 2 friends. She sniffled, then rose her head resolutely and looked Tsunade right in her eyes. I will find them. I will save them. I need to get stronger, and only you can show me how. Tsunade stared dumbfounded at Sakura. She had no intention of going to look for Naruto, she was just going to her secluded hideaway house for a while until Jiraiya found the boy. No real plan, certainly not being a sensei to anyone. But Sakura's plea reminded her so much of her own state after Orochimaru betrayed them, and Jiraiya went off hunting for him. In fact, it was like looking in a funhouse mirror and seeing yourself decades younger. Her mind processed it for a full minute before she turned her back on Sakura. I'm walking east, I hope you can pack fast and catch up to me soon, apprentice. I will not wait for you. Chapter 4 Speed. Naruto stood at the line that Jiraiya had drawn with chalk on the grass. His eyes burned as sweat rolled down into them. The midday sun beat down mercilessly on Naruto, Jiraiya having found himself a nice piece of shade to watch the training from. Naruto scowled at his mentor and friend for a second, then looked back at his target, a chalked kanji written on a stone 100 meters away. He held his breath for a second and then let it out with his effort. Hiraishin no Jutsu. Naruto knew what he wanted to do, he wanted to appear where the seal was. An instantaneous teleportation of himself across space. What actually happened was far from it, as he once again found himself at the correct spot, but missing his clothes. Gah! With a yelp he attempted to cover himself with leaves. Jiraiya grinned. He's getting the hang of it. At least he's not leaving behind his hair or limbs. Come on, boy. Can't you do better than that? Jiraiya called out. His joy at having been reunited with Naruto a while ago still flowing through him. He had found him healthy, and working hard to fulfill a new dream. Of course, Jiraiya could see the sadness in him, but hoped that would ease over time. Naruto let out a few choice curses he had picked up, and ran back to where his clothes had fallen, back at the starting line. As he pushed the white pants on, then the white t-shirt, he looked forlornly at them. Sensei, really no sign of any orange jackets or pants anywhere? Jiraiya chuckled. Not yet, Naruto. I ordered some new clothes for you, but it will take another week to be ready. Plus we have something to discuss that might affect your choice of clothing. Naruto finished putting his boots back on, then stood up. What's that, pervy Sannin? Jiraiya grinned. Nothing would spoil his mood. Well, since you already know about your dad, and you would have by the time you finish learning the Hiraishin, have learned 2 of his jutsus, I thought I'd give you a chance to surpass your dad. Maybe even me. Naruto's eyebrows shot up so high they threatened to merge with his hair. What? How? Jiraiya pushed himself up from under the cotton tree and walked over to where Naruto stood. His eyes squinted from the glare of the sun. I will take you to my Obokuzen. It's time you learnt the sage arts. Jiraiya's eyes grew dark. Those fools at Konoha may have denied you a chance to become Chunin, or Jounin, but a sage trumps all of those and then some. His smile beamed at Naruto. Not many Kages would even dare mess with a sage. Naruto's mouth gaped open, his mind whirling rapidly. If I could become a sage, I'd be respected. Respected enough to form my village and protect it, and everyone in it. Naruto grinned and refocused on his target, breathing in his chakra. Jiraiya nodded. Remember, destination, determination, deliberation. The key words for this technique. Naruto glared at the spot he wanted to go to. Hiraishin no Jutsu. He appeared at the spot, this time only missing his shoes. Yada! He shouted and jumped up. Jiraiya shook his head. Now do it 100 times, then do it without saying it out loud. Doesn't do much good to move at the speed of light if you have to stop to talk for 2 seconds first. Wait, Naruto shouted. How does me becoming a sage affect my beautiful orange? Jiraiya threw back his head and laughed. Orange doesn't really match with the flame coat you earn as a master of the sage arts. It's white and red. Naruto cocked his head to the side in a humorous display of being in deep thought. We'll see, pervy Sannin. We'll see, Senji whistled as he sharpened his sword. He had finished one of the missions he and Naruto had gotten. So far there had been no need to interrupt Naruto's training for any of them. Simple enough escort jobs, 1 or 2 retrievals from kidnappers. Nothing Senji couldn't handle. He sat in the bar and ran the stone over his blade again as he waited for his client to come by and pay. The crowd in the rundown bar was typical of the waterfront establishments in this area. Senji was all too familiar with them, having spent part of his life on the sea. The patrons didn't even spare him a glance. Not that his swords wasn't majestic, just that everyone else was armed in some form or fashion as well. The client sauntered in, a sickly smell of perfume on the obese man wafting its way towards Senji, making him grimace. His clothes were matted yet would have been more elegant on someone of a thinner or less greasy stature. Ah, Senji the dark blade. He flittered into the bar stool next to Senji. His hand dipped into his jacket and withdrew an envelope. Senji took it cheerfully and glanced in it. He had no need to check the money. If the man double-crossed them, he'd pay soon after, he knew that. Plus, in a town like this one, a man who doesn't pay for his odd jobs didn't live very long. Have you heard, Senji? The pirate Torino has set his sights on our Fairport city. I myself will be moving inland to avoid the conflict. Several heads shot up. Apparently eavesdropping was also the norm for this city. Did you say Torino? The pirate captain of the Blood Armada? One man asked. They now had the entire bar's attention. Senji's fat client lapped up the attention. Why, yes. My sources say he would be here by nightfall. That's the problem with being such a successful town, it attracts riff-raff. He haughtily looked down on the patrons of the bar. Well, I guess I'll be. A knife embedded itself in his throat, and he gurgled and choked on his own blood. Riff raff, huh? One of the sailors in a far table got up and retrieved his knife, pulling it hard out of the dying man. I don't like your face. Several men laughed, then went back to drinking. A few others got up to leave town before the pirates got there. Senji looked thoughtful, not even noticing his dead ex-client. The job had been completed anyway. But he'd heard of this pirate, and things looked bad for the town if what he said was true. Lee ran hard, his legs pumping as fast as they could go, for 97 his mind told him. 3 more laps to go around Konoha. His body felt like it was on fire, yet he pressed on. His thoughts, however, were still far away, no matter how hard he tried to not think about certain things. His talk with Guy-sensei had been enlightening. No one had seen or heard from Naruto in months. The closest had been a rumor with someone with his name in a martial arts tournament halfway around the world. The new Hokage did not care what happened to Naruto. He had apparently confirmed that if Naruto died, so does the Kyuubi. So he and the council hoped Naruto would die in the wilderness. If not, well, he never was that skilled a ninja, he would pose no threat. Lee passed the gates at a dead run. The seal. Guy had told Lee how the seal kept the demon at bay, that Naruto was in fact the jailer and the prison, not the demon himself. How could the people be so blind? The people he was sworn to protect? 499. The seal. Lee wondered if he could read more about seals in the Konoha library. It sounded interesting. How could something written have so much power? Lee saw a glimpse of a pink flower and thought of Sakura. She had abandoned the village as well. Her parents had said she was visiting with her aunt in a distant city, but Danzo had not been pleased. They were short-staffed with ninja as it was. Hokage Danzo seemed to want to declare war on the nearest hidden village and expand Konoha's influence. He had already sent emissaries demanding they surrender or face the wrath of Konoha's ninja force. Lee shook his head. No. He could not attack someone who had not attacked him first. But what choices did he have? Not for the first time he wished he knew where Naruto had gone. Was the world outside the walls of Konoha as exciting as he imagined it to be? 500. I need to get much stronger. Lee focused on sprinting his last lap. When Naruto comes back, I may need to help him stand up to the Hokage. Lee didn't even notice, he thought, when Naruto comes back, not if. Kakashi stared at the frog sitting on top of his precious book. The words that came out of the frog had startled him. So Jiraiya had found him. Good. A huge weight lifted off Kakashi's shoulders. At least Naruto was alive. Kakashi looked out his window at the sky. Naruto is training with Jiraiya and another. Sakura had gone training as well as Slug had told Kakashi the day before where she had gone off to. He was now a sensei with no students. No longer a Konoha nin. Danzo needed to make an example of him, the copycat ninja, the only threat to his title of Hokage. Kakashi sighed. He could leave the village, but where would he go? This was home, even if the people in his home were becoming less and less worthy of protecting. Naruto lay panting, staring up at the night sky. He could do the Hiraishin, but not more than twice without feeling exhausted. He also could not do it nonverbally yet. He grinned to himself. At least it was a start. I can learn any jutsu in 1 week, like I did with the Rasengan. Jiraiya lay not far away, snoring off the effects of the 10 bottles of sake he had laying around him. Naruto snorted and closed his eyes. Just for a minute. Boom. The sounds of cannon fire awoke Naruto. His eyes shot open and he jumped off the ground. Jiraiya too was on his feet, eyes scanning westward. Naruto looked as well and could see that the city was on fire. Dark ships had filled the bay and cannons kept up a steady stream of fire into the port city. Pirates, Jiraiya said quietly. Naruto started to run towards the city. Senji and Sensei are there still? Jiraiya just stood and watched as his protege ran off. He frowned. Those ships looked familiar. Something about their sails. Naruto sprinted down the cobblestone street, rushing against an onslaught of smoke, dust, and panicked people. Women and children screamed as the walking wounded made their way out of the city. Naruto heard cackling laughter and a woman's scream. He stopped in his tracks and looked down an alley where a pirate had a sword to a woman's throat. Without thinking, Naruto's hands dipped into his kunai pouch and he had embedded the kunai into the side of the pirate's skull. The woman fell in a heap, sobbing loudly. Get out of the city! Naruto shouted at her, waking her from her trance. He watched as she gathered herself and ran. He then turned to continue heading back to Sensei's house. More pirates had thrown fire torches into a blacksmith's building, catching it immediately on fire. They cackled madly, but that was cut short as a giant of a man in a blacksmith's apron appeared in the doorway. With a start, Naruto recognized the man. No two men could be that size. Guerrera. The Kumite champion cracked his neck, then charged the pirates. Naruto didn't need to watch to know the outcome of that fight, but he needed to pass that way. He began to run, looking to jump over the conflict. As he pushed himself into the air with chakra, he heard a cry from just inside the doorway. A baby crying. He spun in midair, his mind working furiously. Guerrera was pushing the pirates away from his building. The bottom floor wasn't on fire yet. A baby, he's protecting a baby. Naruto dashed past the men. In a split second he was alongside Guerrera and their eyes met. In that moment, with a nod, an understanding happened between them. Guerrera with a roar crushed one pirate's skull while throwing another across the street. Naruto entered the burning building and saw her, a baby girl wrapped in blankets in a basket just inside the doorway. He grabbed the basket and turned to leave when a beam on fire fell across the doorway, fire raining down with it. He heard a deep shout of no from outside. That has to be Guerrera. Naruto pointed his free hand at the beam and fire in the doorway. Move, Guerrera! He shouted back as loud as he could, hoping the man would hear him over the raging inferno. A blast of wind destroyed the beam into flaming splinters that raced into the bodies of the pirates unlucky enough to be used by Guerrera as a shield. He peeked over them, then tossed the bodies aside as Naruto charged out the building, holding the baby close to his chest, having discarded the basket. Guerrera kicked the last pirate down the street, then reached for the baby, tears actually showing in the big man's eyes. He stared at Naruto with gratitude. My only child, my daughter? Was all Guerrera said. Naruto nodded at him. Better head out of town, those cannons would do more damage than the pirates will. Guerrera lumbered out of the city, clutching his daughter to his chest. Naruto rounded the corner and stopped dead in his tracks at the spectacle. Senji stood battling 5 pirates, swords clashing in the light of the fire that engulfed Sensei's house. Sensei himself was pulling a trunk behind him slowly, leaving the house behind. Naruto rushed up to him. Sensei, what are you doing? Leaving Naruto, the house is on fire. Even if I could out it, what would be the point? All things come and go. This town is dead, listen to it. Naruto could hear the screams, running, the sounds of fire and wood snapping. Cannons firing and laughter as hundreds of pirates swarmed the port city. But we can fight them off. Naruto shouted. Yes, we could. Tenchi nodded. And we might win too. But the citizens of this town care not for it. It was convenient, that's all. This is no one's home, Naruto. What would you be fighting to protect? Naruto looked hopelessly as more people ran. This seemed wrong. 1 hour later. They stood on the hill Naruto and Senji had first crested when they saw the city. The sun had just begun to rise. Flames still danced across the smoldering city. All the people who were able to leave had already done so. The screams had long since stopped. Now it was just the wild laughter of the pirates as they looted whatever treasures were left behind. Naruto seethed in rage. Jiraiya put his hand on Naruto's shoulder. Everyone is out, just pirates left. Time to go, apprentice. A burning started in Naruto's belly. A growing rage that he could only explain as loss and anger. He had only been here a short while, but once again, he was being forced to leave a village, a home. Tenchi's words were not true. Here again he had found acceptance. Here again, he, Naruto, had found a home. The fire in him bubbled and boiled. Jiraiya, who had begun to walk away, stopped in mid-track and looked back in fear. This chakra, no? Naruto couldn't see his eyes change to slits. He heard the growl escape his throat though. He recognized the signs of himself drawing on the Kyuubi's power as he punched his 2 hands into the air in front of him. Wind started to circulate around Naruto as if he was in a tornado. Tenchi stared at Naruto. This move hadn't been perfected yet. But this level of chakra was more than they used in training. Even if unfinished, the strength of this move would. Tenchi gasped. Naruto, no! With a snarl and a howl, Naruto gathered an incredible amount of chakra and pushed forward, palms facing the burning town. A sudden burst of wind raged and raced towards it, a huge arc that expanded rapidly as it approached. Trees were destroyed in its path, rocks hurled and shattered. The first buildings it came into contact with crumbled without resistance. The shockwave just blasted its way through the town. The screams returned, but this time those of dying or about to die pirates. The wave continued quickly through the entire port city, decimating it. It reached the bay and kept going, splintering ships that were docked. The jutsu faded quickly though over the water, dying before it hit the big ship, the main one. Naruto fell to his knees panting, trying to regain control of himself. Senji whistled. That was the move he had first tried back in the Kumite. If that had worked then, the audience, the town, hell maybe even he, would have died. The few citizens that had stayed to witness the onslaught ran far away from Naruto, leaving a very select few in the clearing. Jiraiya said nothing, but realized that sage training would have to wait. Naruto had a temper problem, and its name was Kyubi. He needed to get that under control first. Tenchi looked down sadly at his apprentice. This was such a huge burden for a child to bear. Naruto struggled to his feet, wiping tears from his eyes. Jiraiya rested his hand on Naruto's shoulder. Let's go, Senji asked. Well, where are we going? Naruto looked around the clearing. Aside from his new extended family, Gaara had come over with his daughter still in his hands. I owe you, young one. His deep bass voice echoed. Thank you for saving my daughter. Where will you go? Naruto asked, looking up at the big man. Gaara shrugged. Many towns need blacksmith. We'll start over somewhere else. Something clicked in Naruto's head then. A blacksmith. Maybe it was time to start. Everyone? Naruto cleared his throat, his eyes clearly including Gaara. Would you please help me start my village? Would you come with me to Tengaku? 2 weeks later, as they walked in the shadow of the pathways of heaven and hell, Jiraiya was once again lost in thought. Naruto's plan made a remarkable amount of sense. They had nowhere to really go, he did need somewhere to train, and there were good people out there who needed protection as well as a safe place to raise a family. The world was not always a safe place, and a hidden ninja village was actually safer than most. Gaara had come along quietly, not saying much to anyone. He took care of his daughter like a gentle giant. From what Jiraiya understood, the fighter's wife had died in childbirth. The baby, Gabriella, didn't cry much, having her father's quiet attitude and strength. He had nowhere to go, so starting over in a new village was the same as anywhere else, plus he owed Naruto for saving his daughter's life. Jiraiya smiled. Naruto had a way of pulling in people around him. Just what the leader of a new village needed. We're here, Naruto said out loud, excitement in his voice. He pointed to a deep gully in the Rocky Mountain. With a huge grin on that prankster face, he jumped in. A gust of wind picked him up and shot him up to the sky. With a laugh, Senji was the next to follow, then Tenchi, Gaara and Gabriella, then reluctantly Jiraiya. He thought angrily, there's a reason I use toads and not birds. I hate flying. Chapter 5, Beginnings. Jiraiya landed on his ass, face aghast at the ride he had just taken. To his left he spied Gaara and his daughter, their faces in awe of their surroundings. Jiraiya himself was taken aback by what he saw. They were literally perched atop a huge, solid cloud. Ahead of them lay an island with trees swaying in the wind. A few birds flew past them. Jiraiya never would call himself an expert on animal life, but he was fairly sure that he had never seen birds that color before. Naruto bounded over full of energy. Come on, let me show you guys my island. Jiraiya smiled, his mind racing. This place was impossible to find, extremely easy to defend. It's the perfect location for a hidden village. His apprentice was indeed the number one most unpredictable ninja indeed. He followed Naruto and laughed. Those fools in Konoha don't know what they've lost in the young ninja. Senji sat legs folded on the white beach of heaven as Naruto called this place. A cooling breeze brushed his hair away from his face. A small contented smile was all that gave away his thoughts. His trust in Naruto was well founded. At first he did not believe in this place, but to actually sit here, on a cloud in the sky, Senji began to believe that anything was possible in this world. He frowned slightly. His leader and friend Naruto was training to become stronger. Surely he too needed to work harder in order to be worthy to be Naruto's protector, his shield. His eyes closed as he gave serious thought on how he could improve his swordsmanship. That night they sat in the initial camp Naruto had built months ago. A wild boar Gaara had caught roasting over an open fire. Jiraiya and Tenchi looked at their apprentice. He had put some surprising thought into this. I've been thinking about it since I left here. We need a supply of water and electricity. This place is made from wind and there will never be a lack of it. Couldn't we use those windmill things to make electricity? And there is a lake not far from here with rainwater. It's fairly large. I don't know much about it, but I think it could last us? Tenchi nodded. Yes, Naruto, some wind turbines would certainly be a very smart way to generate the power we would need. I know a city where I can order those. Naruto grinned at that. The first person to say anything he suggested was smart. Truth is, he had indeed been thinking about this a lot. Jiraiya rubbed his chin. The water could be a problem. We don't know how often it rains up here. We're not so high that other clouds can't fly over us, but at the same time, we don't know how often it happens. I'll do some monitoring. We could probably work something else out. I saw the ocean far below us on the far side of the island. Perhaps a displacement seal to transfer some water to our lake. I'll work on that. Guerrero watched his baby girl sleep in the little cot that Jiraiya had fashioned for him out of branches and leaves. He cleared his throat. You have taken me and my daughter in with you, accepted us without questions of the past. This I appreciate. I will start over here with you, help build the village you dream of. There are many rocks I can mold to useful size. I would stay here with my daughter and raise her, if you will allow it. Naruto sprang to his feet. Of course. Tengaku accepts all who need somewhere to start over. Ninja, warrior, and citizen alike. Everyone gathered around the fire grinned wildly at Naruto's outburst. His energy was contagious. What should we start on tomorrow? Naruto asked, eyes burning with what his old friend Lee would have called the fires of youth. Jiraiya stood up and walked over to Naruto. With a softness that was hardly becoming of a Sannin, he pushed Naruto to the ground. Sit down, Naruto. He laughed. We need to see what funds we have available to start buying the wind turbines, plus a lot of other small things we will need to survive. Tools, storage bins for food. This is not something that can be rushed into without planning. Senji threw a large bag of gold coins to the ground. Here are the earnings from the past month's jobs. It should buy some of the items we need. Naruto frowned slightly, then grinned. He bounded back to his feet and ran into the darkness of the forest, away from the fire and everyone. 5 minutes later he was back clutching a much larger bag of bills and coins. I found this the last time I was here. It came with the wind. Will this be enough to get started too? He asked excitedly. Tenchi opened the bag and briefly glanced at its contents. He smiled at everyone. Looks like we have a village to start building. So when you said we, Naruto grunted as he lifted another rock onto his shoulders, what you really meant was me. The field they had chosen to build the village was close to the entry point. A rainfall lake sat right next to it, and large trees as old as time itself grew throughout. Naruto had thought it was beautiful until Tenchi had informed him he would be leveling the field himself. We need to build your core physical strength, and your use of the various jutsu you've learned. Naruto grunted and stared at the end of the field. He had placed a seal marker there. With a grunt he flashed himself to the seal with Horatian, boulder cradled on his shoulder. He then walked an extra few feet and lifted the boulder over his head, chakra-infused arms and legs giving him a small boost so that he could heft the big stone. He threw it in the pile that had begun to grow, then jogged back to the starting point for another big rock. Jiraiya and Guerrera stared down at the paper in front of them. They were beginning to map out the shape of the city. The first thing we should look at is layout. A protective wall, of course, but that can come last. A few houses for us to live in. A central building for administration. Guerrera spoke lowly. Jiraiya drew a circle in the dead center of the map. Let's start with our main tower here. We can have lodgings in this tower, and then expand outwards. I think it best if we focus on building one thing really well first, and then expand outwards. Guerrera frowned thoughtfully, then nodded. Yes. I agree. Now the wind turbines should run along the northern side of the boundary. That's where the wind is the strongest. We can set up a wind farm there, and build our main electricity building here, drew a box on the map. Jiraiya nodded this time. Agreed. I'd like the water plant to be on the eastern side closest to the lake. From there we can feed in pipes to the central building and anywhere else. Guerrera looked up at Jiraiya. There are a couple things we need to consider. I am a mason and blacksmith. But I know nothing of the electricity grid or water plant. We need someone else to build those. All I can build is the shell building, but even that I'd need advice on. Jiraiya sighed. Yes, we need 2 engineers for this. When Tenchi and I go looking for the turbines, we will see who we can find. He grinned. But who wouldn't want to work in heaven? Guerrera smiled and laughed loudly. I have an idea for the style of buildings considering the name of this city and its location. Jiraiya smirked. I leave that up to you. Senji fell in behind Naruto, having been drafted to help with the clearing of the large field. He too picked up a large boulder and used his own body flicker technique to teleport himself at high speed to the far end of the field. The sweat rolled down his shirtless back as he puffed hard and turned back to jog and get another one. Hey Naruto, he called out to his friend as they jogged in unison. Why don't you use those clones you made before and let's get this done faster? His sentence finished as they get back in front of Tenchi, who promptly rapped him on his head with a fan. Fool! You would look for a shortcut to hard work? Senji grinned sheepishly and rubbed the back of his head. Naruto has been told no bunshins. This is as much a mental experience as it is a physical endurance one. There will be no shortcuts. Naruto nodded wordlessly. A smile spread on his face. Senji, you afraid you can't keep it up? I bet I can clear this half of the field before you clear that half. A look of shock and then a feral grin split Senji's face. Oh, you're on Naruto. I'll take that bet. Loser cooks for a month. Naruto grinned. Deal. The two of them raced with renewed vigor to grab another boulder. Konoha, Shikamaru fiddled with the piece of straw in his mouth as he looked up at the clouds. Troublesome, he thought. Hey Shika. Chuji hailed him out as he approached. Next to him was Team 10, Niji, Lee and 1010. Shikamaru looked over at them and waved them over. The hill he was on was perfect for cloud watching. Also perfect for talking with friends inconspicuously and discreetly as anyone who approached could be seen. Hey guys. We're just waiting for the others now. They sat down and within a few minutes the others showed up. Ino approached bringing with her Hinata, Kiba and Shino. With a nod they all sat down and looked at the clouds. Shikamaru spoke up. Okay guys, I asked you to come so we could talk about something important. Lee, subdued for once, nodded. Naruto. Shikamaru nodded. Yes, but more than that, the state of Konoha. The new Hokage is a warmonger. He seeks to ignite the flames of war with Suna and IWA. The balls are already in motion on this one. Shikamaru, being the only Chunin in the group so far, had access to much more information than the others. Information that disturbed him. What the council did to Naruto was deplorable. He did nothing but fail to bring back that traitor Sasuke. The faces of all gathered clouded over with anger. Who are we fighting to protect? Are we on the side of right and justice anymore? Niji spoke up. It is more complicated than just that. Our clans have thrown their support, for the most part, behind Danzo. We cannot go against the clans. Hinata pressed her fingers together and nodded. Father himself hates Danzo, but believes we must follow his orders if we are to maintain order in Konoha. Hi! Lee stood up and shouted. It is true the older generation does not have the will of fire needed to fix this problem. But our youthful flames burn brightly. Sit down, Lee. Shikamaru scowled. What I'm asking here is, what would you guys be willing to do? How far would we go to protect this our home? I myself thought of leaving, maybe wandering the world, see if I could even maybe meet Naruto again. But this, Konoha, is my home. I cannot leave it just because some fool currently runs it. Kib nodded. This is our lair. My pack will not leave. Shino agreed. Our colonies cannot be raised in any other area without much damage to them. The Aburame clan cannot relocate. Shikamaru sighed. Well then we must deal with this situation on our own, and efficiently. When you have an unwelcome growth, you must remove it. Tenten gasped. Are you proposing we assassinate the Hokage? Shikamaru choked. No. Cough. That would be suicide. We are a bunch of Genins and Chunin level ninja. We cannot go up against ANBU and Jounin level guards. No, what I propose is a systematic attack on his credibility. Frustrating the leaders of this village while we build our support base. A base we could use eventually to overthrow Danzo and reclaim our village. Everyone looked at Shikamaru closely. What he was proposing was treason to Konoha. But what was their alternative? Sit quietly by and watch their village die. The very morals they grew up believing washed away by bloodthirst? How do we frustrate the leaders? Kiba asked. Guerrilla tactics, Shikamaru replied. We interfere with essential services, not in a serious way initially. We paint slogans, raise awareness. Kiba frowned, then a grin broke his face and he laughed. Like how Naruto used to do pranks on the village? Shikamaru nodded. Maybe not so simply, but yes. We prank them, escalating the seriousness until things come to a head. Lee grinned wildly. Yes. Naruto's youthful spirit will live on in us. His friends. His army. Ino laughed. Never in a million years she would be contemplating doing what she was about to with her friends. So we're Naruto's army, and we are going to terrorize our own village. Sounds great. What shall we do first? Shikamaru shook his head. Are we all okay with this plan? Anyone who doesn't want to participate can leave now. I trust everyone here with my life, so I know the secret will be safe. Neji stood up. Naruto's army. It has a nice ring to it. I've already decided to forge my own destiny. This is a path I believe is righteous and should be walked down. Hinata stood up as well. I too will join. We must save the village, and Naruto too, she added shyly. Kiba laughed and bounded to his feet. Hell yeah, let's make some noise. Lee jumped high and landed in his famous nice guy pose. We will succeed in the revolution of our youth. The fires burn brightly in us. Shino stood and nodded. Ten shook her head and stood up. I'm with you, my friends. Things are not right the way they are. Chuji nodded to his best friend Shikamaru. No words necessary. Of course he would side with him. Shikamaru sighed. So troublesome. Naruto's army is officially formed. Now, here is my first plan. Hidden village of the sand. Gaara! Temari's voice echoed in the halls of the Kazekage's tower. Her footsteps made no noise as she ran, paper clutched in her hand. Just days earlier had seen Gaara elected to be the newest Kazekage of Suna. Of course this was all tainted when Gaara found out his friend Naruto had been banished from his own village. They had sent out Anbu to look for him, offer him citizenship in Suna. But Naruto had been nowhere to be found. Until now. She slammed open the doors to Gaara's office and saw him sitting behind the desk talking to their brother Kenkaru. News! I have news of Naruto, Temari said breathlessly. Gaara's eyes widened as he stood to his feet, palms on the desk. What do you know, Temari? Kenkaru asked. He was seen in a seaside city in a country far from here. The name is the same. They're describing him as a city killer. He apparently destroyed the town as it was being pillaged by pirates. The entire city in one blast. I'm trying to find out more details now, but it's sketchy. Temari spilled her words out as fast as she could. What we do know is that someone who matches the description of Jiraiya of the Sannin was seen with him. Gaara nodded, then sat back down. Good. He rubbed his temples. At least we know he is alive. And with Jiraiya he'll be okay. Kenkaru sighed. His brother had been very worried about his friend. Well, Gaara, I guess we should focus now on this letter from Konoha's newest Hokage requesting a meeting. Gaara's eyes grew cold. Yes, I think I'd like to meet the people responsible for banishing Naruto. Tengaku, Naruto, and Senji paid panting in the grass. The giant field had been cleared completely of rocks and boulders. It had taken them 3 days and nights of non-stop work, but they did it. It was considered a tie as they both passed out at the same time. Tenchi finished mapping out exactly what he needed as he watched their progress. The bond between the two had grown during this exercise. Plus, he hoped it would give them a huge appreciation for the work that goes into building a village. He leaped off the 10-foot-tall boulder he was sitting on, and was about to walk away when he turned back. Damn, forgot this rock needs to move over there too. With a quick glance downfield he swung his leg and kicked at the boulder. It shuddered and then flew across the ground and right into the pile of rocks. Tenchi nodded, then proceeded back to camp to see what Jiraiya and Guerrera had gotten up to. That night, a recovered Naruto and Senji stood amongst everyone else in their little group. Jiraiya hefted the separate bags of money he had placed out. This bag has enough for the turbines. Our biggest but most necessary expense. He handed it to Tenchi. This bag is for tools we'll need to build and maintain the buildings as well as food supplies and storage bins. He handed it to Guerrera. This bag I'll keep is for the water plant. Naruto nodded. While you guys are doing that, Senji and I will continue to prepare the land and area. Jiraiya has given us plans for trenches we need to dig for the water pipes when they come. Also, we are to dig the foundation cellar for the tower we'll be building first. Right. Jiraiya smiled. Good. Tomorrow we go our own ways and meet back in 1 month's time. Naruto, I expect you to continue training in that time. Tenchi chimed in. I want to see one new wind-based attack by the time I get back. And you better impress me. Turning to Senji, he added. I'll be notifying my daughter of my whereabouts, Senji. Would you like me to mention anything to her about you? Senji stiffened, then shook his head. He turned quietly and walked away from the fire. Tenchi sighed and looked back to Naruto. Please look after Senji, Naruto. He can be a bit impulsive and stubborn. Jiraiya almost choked. Didn't Tenchi know who he was talking to? That was like asking a wolf to guard another wolf. Tomorrow their individual errands would begin, and Naruto and Senji would be alone to build and train. 1 week later, Konoha. Ah. My water is running orange. A woman's voice split the early morning. Mine too. Another voice, and another joined the rising cacophony. Every tap that was opened gushed forth bright orange water. Those brave enough to try it realized it was just colored, had no taste, and was in fact normal water, with the unfortunate side effect of painting whatever it touched a bright orange color. An explosion rocked the village, and Danzo looked out over his balcony at the orange fountains, the orange drains where the water ran, and the words that suddenly appeared in the sky above Konoha. Naruto's army strikes back. Down with the dictator Danzo. His fists clenched, Danzo bit back a curse as he ordered his ANBU to investigate. Chapter 6, Rage. Naruto's eyes narrowed, his target unaware of his presence. The cool wind swept along his bare back, the sweat rolling down his spine slowly. His fingers clutched the kunai in his hand tighter, as he slowly maneuvered himself closer. The target raised his head and looked around suspiciously for a few seconds, before going back to drinking water from the pond. Naruto shifted position slightly, bent back his arm, and threw the kunai dead on target. Senji jumped away at the last second, exclaiming loudly. Unfortunately, he didn't see where he was jumping and ended up landing in the pond. With a splash and lots of spluttering, he emerged and growled at Naruto. What the hell, Naruto? Naruto was on the ground rolling in laughter. Tears streamed down his face as he sought to catch his breath. You should have seen your face. Naruto managed to squeeze out between laughing. Senji walked out of the water, dripping and fuming. He glared at Naruto and drew his sword. Let's see if you still laugh when I shave that head of yours clean of all hair. Senji barked at Naruto, and Flash jumped to within feet of Naruto. Naruto yelped and did a Hurration to take himself several meters away in white blur. Senji followed quickly with another Flash jump and swung his sword at Naruto's head. Naruto managed to dodge it at the last second by flipping into a cartwheel. Mid-spin he did a Hurration again to move further away. This cat and mouse game they had invented a week ago, and they were both getting much better at using their speed maneuvers whilst fighting or dodging. Naruto appeared at the end of the island. From this side could see the ocean. Senji appeared behind him, but too close, and his forward momentum pushed both of them over the edge. Naruto's eyes opened large as he realized what was happening. Frantically he tried to flash jump back to the island, but Senji's arms were caught up in Naruto's, and they started to spin as they fell. They screamed for 2 seconds before realizing that a gust of wind picked them up and started pushing them out to sea. Naruto felt the familiar sensation, much like the wind river that brings you to his island. He and Senji held themselves in check as much as they could, as the river of wind turned and twisted. Naruto felt like they had done a loop, pretty sure he saw the cloud that hid the island in the sky not behind them, but miles and miles away to his right now. The wind rushed them onto land again, over what looked like a small sea village. It deposited them in a heap on top of a small grassy hill. Naruto and Senji looked around. Senji pointed east. That's home. A good 3 days' travel. He sighed. Guess we should start walking? Naruto nodded and they headed east. The path from the clearing passed through a small wooded area. Naruto and Senji strode through it, disgruntled at the journey that in the space of 5 minutes was thrust on them. The canopy of rich greens and the sounds of birds' thoughts soon had them feeling lazy and relaxed. The crunch of their boots on the gravel and dirt road became hypnotic. Naruto yawned and stretched his arms out, his white shirt flapping in the gentle wind that blew against them. Senji sighed and cracked his neck. Help! An ear-shattering scream split the silence, sending hundreds of birds flying from the forest. Naruto and Senji stopped in their tracks immediately. Anybody! Please help! The voice shrieked again. Senji pointed off to their right. That way. In a blur, both he and Naruto were flashing towards the source of the scream. Jump after jump. It took them 30 seconds to arrive at what looked like a few small houses on a piece of farmland. What they saw, though, horrified them. 3 bodies were hanging from a post over the horse's corral. All 3 had been brutally beaten and bloodied. Their hands were tied behind their backs, and Naruto could see that their feet were shackled. What made Naruto almost retch was that the bodies were of 2 children and 1 woman. Standing not far from there was a large group of roughly 30 warriors, laughing and throwing a little girl to the ground. Senji could see that there appeared to be another 6 people being attacked by the warriors. 1 old man, a younger man and woman who held onto each other, and 3 other children. It was one of the children that was screaming. Naruto and Senji didn't even look at each other. Senji disappeared in a black blur. The child the warriors were throwing disappeared. Senji reappeared next to the 7 civilians holding the child in his arms. He held the crying girl as he said to no one in particular, "Naruto, don't miss." With a primeval yell of anger, Naruto leapt into the air above the group. He had once been subject to beatings as an orphan, but to see children being mutilated, killed, laughed at as it was happening, it was too much for Naruto to handle. They had time to see a figure in white soaring above them, the sun behind him as his arms swept outwards. A hailstorm of wind Simban rained down on the men. All the practice with Kenshiro had paid off. Most of Naruto's needles found their targets, but more importantly, none came anywhere near Senji and the civilians. The warriors dropped like flies as the Senban pierced them completely, the wind projectiles not stopping till they were embedded completely in the ground. As Naruto landed on the far side of them, close to Senji, only 6 men were left standing. Senji stood with his sword ready in case any attack came towards the civilians, but he left the attack to Naruto in this case. None of these men looked like they would be any sort of challenge to either of them. He was right. Naruto rushed forward. His bow's staff was back on the island, but all coherent thought left his mind as he snarled and his fist connected with the first face. He pushed wind chakra to his knuckles to increase the blunt force. The result was catastrophic. The man's head exploded in a puff of mist and bone fragments. 1 man rushed at Naruto with a downward swing of a large axe. Naruto sidestepped it and pivoted. His right hand grabbed the axe and wrenched it out of the man's hand as his spin continued, the axe coming back around to remove the man's head. Naruto could feel the chakra in himself boiling. Senji noticed Naruto's eyes becoming slits and his whisker birthmarks getting deeper into his face. In a blur of white, though, it was all over. Naruto flashed from 1 man to the next, killing them before they saw him. The bloodbath had taken all of 15 seconds. Senji turned to look at the family behind him. "Are you okay?" The older man, who had to be at least 75, nodded. "Yes, thank you. Thank you, our saviors." He fell to his knees weeping. The younger man and woman helped him up. Naruto breathed in calmly, quieting the monster inside. He could hear it laughing, though, and a small voice that breathed into his soul. "Yes," was what he heard. None of them noticed a shadow move in the forest as a hidden warrior ran from the carnage. A short while later, Naruto and Senji sat at a small dining table inside one of the farmhouses. The kitchen was small but tidy. The family they had rescued sat on the opposite side. The old man at the head of the table, the younger couple sat together on his left, their hands holding each other, as well as 2 children. The other 2 children sat on the old man's right, the boy holding his sister who was still sniffling. They had just finished burying the 3 bodies, who Naruto had discovered to be the boy and girl's mother and siblings. The old man spoke first. "Thank you for coming to our rescue. It will be a while before our looker's men discover something happened here. By then, we should be long gone." "What did they want with you?" Naruto asked. "Well," the old man glanced at the rest of his family. "We are what are left of a clan that specializes in what we call the Butsusuzu. The local warlord discovered us and was forcing us to, well, make horrible things." Naruto and Senji both looked puzzled. They asked simultaneously, "What is the Butsusuzu?" The old man looked at them suspiciously, then laughed. "I need to remember that you both saved our lives, and that you," he nodded at Naruto, "are clearly a chakra user yourself. Debutsusuzu is the ability to create animals." Naruto's eyes opened wide. "You mean like a summons? Like this?" Naruto made some hand signs and slammed them down on the table. A small frog appeared. He looked at Naruto for a few seconds in confusion. Naruto then dispersed the jutsu. The old man smiled. No. That was summoning craft. We don't call animals from one location to another. We create animals from nothingness. It is a complex art, especially when we wish to create hybrids or anything that doesn't already exist in nature. Sometimes the lifespan is just so short in our creations. Wow! Naruto exclaimed. Senji seemed to be in disbelief. The younger man spoke up. We should start packing to leave this place. It is not safe. He looked frustrated as he spoke. Senji asked, why should you leave? It's just one warlord, right? The younger man nodded in reply. Naruto smiled. How big an army? 100 men? More? At least 300. The younger woman replied. Senji and Naruto grinned. Great. Practice. No! The younger man shouted. No one else will die because of us. We will leave and we are taking our children with us. We will find somewhere to go where no one can find us. Where we can live in peace. He stood from the table, shrugged off his wife's hand and moved to leave the room. Wait, Naruto said. He looked thoughtful. We are building a village. A village where no one can be hated or used. Where everyone can feel safe. Would you come with us to our village? I mean, it's now being built. We don't have any buildings yet, but the land is cleared and Jiraiya and Kenshiro and Mr. Guerrera are bringing back materials and supplies for us to start it. The old man looked at Naruto in shock. You'd invite us to go with you? Senji smiled. Naruto here wouldn't leave anyone in a bad situation, not if he can help it. Like he said, the place is under construction. But if you have to start over somewhere, it's a great place to do it. There's nowhere safer in the world. The young man stopped in the doorway and turned. Really? We could stay there? We could stop hiding? His wife came up to him and held his hand, smiling. She turned to face Naruto. We'd love to. Neither she nor her husband saw the arrows that pierced their hearts, but Naruto, Senji and the rest of the family heard the breaking of the kitchen window, and saw the shafts of black wood appear in the chests of the two adults. They died instantly, falling with a clump to the floor that signaled the start of screams from their children. Blood spurted from their mouths, their shocked lifeless eyes locking with Naruto's and Senji's for 1 second. Chairs scraped as Naruto and Senji lunged at the old man and the kids, tackling them to the kitchen floor. A hailstorm of arrows zinged by overhead as the girls screamed and cried. Senji sprang from his prone position and out one of the shattered window. Outside he'd have a better chance to counterattack than inside. He hit the ground in a roll and had time to see a volley of arrows coming at him. He drew his sword and swung it in a wide circle, deflecting the arrows. A quick glance confirmed his suspicion. The warlord had come with what had to be his entire army. He flash-jumped to the left. He knew he could take out a good few of them, but he also knew something they didn't. Naruto was only going to be a few seconds behind him, and Naruto would be mad at the death of those two innocents. Senji thought it best to get out of the line of fire while killing as many as he could. He was right. The wall of the house exploded outwards, sending shards of wood and glass flying like deadly projectiles. The shrapnel shredded the mercenaries nearest to the house. A looker himself sat on a huge horse in the middle of his army of mercenaries, his sallow face and dark beard standing in stark contrast to each other. The earrings and tattoos that adorned his body spoke of someone who loved pain and mutilation. He snarled at the appearance of Naruto and Senji, and the losses to his army. Kill them! He ordered. Naruto, however, didn't give them time to act on those orders. If anyone had been close enough to see, Naruto's irises had become slits. A reddish glow seemed to surround him, and he let loose a yell that seemed more feral than human. A wave of red chakra literally exploded off of him, sending the bodies of the warriors closest to him hurtling through the air. His scream continued as wave after wave of anger washed over him, red chakra wrapping itself around him and then exploding outwards like blasts of gale force wind. The front ranks of the army were atomized into bloody mist, the middle ranks scrambling over each other to back away from the demon they saw before them. Senji stood still for one wide-eyed second. Shit, he burst into action, the soldiers he had been fighting running away as fast as they could. He had never seen Naruto get this way, but he felt sickly at the sight. The chakra hadn't reached him, but he felt foul this close. But He realized Naruto had gone completely berserker and forgotten the house behind him and the children who were still crying and cowering on the floor of the house. Naruto's chakra threatened closer and closer to them. Senji Flash jumped into the house and barked commands, pointing out the back door, away from Naruto and the army. That way! Run! The urgency in his voice spurring the older children to grab the younger ones and run. The old patriarch was busy making hand signs as fast as he could manage, as Senji looked on in shock. The table lit up, then became a huge bear. The bear stood up and blocked the chakra waves coming through the shredded hole in the kitchen, its fur being torn to shreds at each wave. It let out howls of pain but kept its place, giving the old man time to move as fast as he could out the back door, and make sure the children escaped. Senji ran with them out the back door, and looked back in time to see the house explode into shards of wood. He saw what looked to be Naruto, surrounded by red chakra at least 4 times bigger than himself. He could have sworn he saw what might have been a few tails swinging behind Naruto. Senji's blood ran cold. Was the demon breaking free of its container? His fist clenched tighter on his sword. Naruto was his friend, but if he had not choice. He prepared to flash jump to Naruto when the boy in question screamed louder than Senji had heard before. The red chakra began to shrink inwards. Senji couldn't see from this angle, but he had the impression that Naruto was concentrating immensely. There was almost a vacuum effect as the chakra was pulled into his body. Wood, dirt, body parts, all tumbled and made their way towards Naruto with his screaming never ending. Senji looked on in amazement. It was as if he was the center of the universe, and the universe was. Senji turned to the family with a panicked expression on his face. He swung his sword in the hardest slash he could manage, digging a huge hole out of the ground. Jump in! Now! He grabbed the old man and literally threw him in. He tackled the children into the hole just as the noise became complete silence for 1 second. All the chakra completely pulled into his body. Naruto had a vague idea of what he was doing, but he had no idea how to control what was about to happen. He really hoped Senji had gotten away with the surviving family members. Silence for 1 heartbeat. Senji breathed heavily. A looker looked at what remained of his forces, and prepared to bark out a command. Naruto exploded in a final burst of chakra. This chakra, however, was not red, but instead it was a blast of white light and wind that erupted from his body like a bomb. The remaining army members, house, nearby forest had their very existence erased a layer at a time. Flesh was peeled from bones, blood was atomized, screams were left unheard as the sound of the erupting wind was deafening. In their hole, Senji and the family clutched each other tightly as the wind ripped by overhead. It was over in seconds, but it felt like minutes. Naruto collapsed in a heap, his white clothes shredded, hanging in tatters. A large circular crater was all around him. Not a trace of the house, the army, or the nearby forest for 200 yards in any direction. Senji stood up carefully, looking in disbelief at the level of destruction. Note to self, don't get Naruto pissed. Jiraiya looked at the sack of coins in his hand. With a sigh he walked into the bar. When he needed to be, he could be focused. And he was insanely proud of his apprentice Naruto's ambition to start a village. He looked around and cleared his throat. This town was famous for what he needed. I am looking, he announced loudly, getting everyone's attention. For anyone who can build a water plant for a new village. Most of the heads turned away, but one old man looked across at him and walked over. What sort of water plant? Jiraiya shrugged. I don't know. We are building a new village, and have a lake as a source of water. We need to filter the water, and pipe it to the buildings in the village. It's a start from scratch sort of job. The old man rubbed his scruffy chin. I've not had to build one in many years, but I've done what you are talking about before. I can show you what you need to buy, and arrange transport. Jiraiya nodded. I have my own means of transport. But I would need you to show me the needed items. My name is... The old man brushed his hand and scoffed. I've been around the world enough to know your face. You're Jiraiya of the Sannin. You're trustworthy, so I believe you will pay fairly for this job. The old man walked back over to the table he was sitting at and hefted a bag onto his shoulders. You're lucky I was passing through this town. I don't think you'd find anyone as good as me anywhere close to here. Maybe more to the south. He walked with Jiraiya outside the bar. My grandson Inari should be around here somewhere. We'll be off immediately, I take it. Chapter 7 Seeds. Naruto stared up at the birds overhead, gliding on invisible currents of air. If only I had wings, we'd be back home in no time. He sighed and listened to the whisper of his bare feet on the sandy road. They'd left the crater that was the Kazimo clan's old home behind hours ago. The old man and children trudged on right behind Naruto, with Senji taking up the rear. Naruto really wished he had left something of the house. Maybe then he could have gotten some shoes or something to wear. That last release of chakra he had released had completely destroyed his clothes. His tattered white clothes still hung on his back, his pants shredded below the knees, his shoes long gone. Senji scanned the forest they walked through carefully. He really doubted that any members of that guerrilla army remained after Naruto decimated them, but it didn't hurt to be careful. He thought back to when Naruto went berserk. It sure was a sight to behold. He didn't think anyone could stand up to that onslaught. The demon within him had certainly given him amazing levels of chakra. Senji had a question that was bothering him though. "Hey Naruto!" he shouted to the front of their procession. Naruto turned around and walked backwards on the road so he could look at Senji with a quizzical eyebrow. "That last chakra blast, that wasn't your resident. It felt different," Senji asked carefully. The new clan didn't know as yet that Naruto had the Kyuubi inside him, and Senji thought it best for Naruto to explain that at a later time. Naruto looked thoughtful. "Honestly, it's all a bit of a blur. But," he looked up at the sky, "I think I changed his chakra into my own, channeled it to mix with mine trying to suppress it. But it was too much to hold inside." Senji shook his head. "Hell of a thing to do by accident. That's a forbidden art if I ever saw one." Naruto grinned and put his hand behind his head. "Yeah, I guess it was pretty away so." His words were cut short as he tripped over a rock in the road while walking backwards and landed on his ass. A small giggle escaped from one of the older girls. Naruto smiled at them, then looked inquisitively to the old man. "Hey, we don't know any of your names." "I'm Naruto Uzumaki. That's my friend Senji." The patriarch stopped and pointed to everyone. "These are the twins Baku and Benika." He motioned to the youngest children, the most recent orphans who had just seen their parents murdered. He then pointed to the older boy and girl. "The boy is Junya, and the girl is Fuki. Also brother and sister. Twins are a clan trait." The old man smiled. "And I am Tora. Tora Kazimo." Naruto dusted himself off and looked for what seemed an eternity at the orphans. 1,000 thoughts went through Naruto's mind. Senji could see intense sadness cross his face to be replaced by quiet determination. "Nice to meet you guys properly. We'll be home in a couple days. We will protect the Kazimo clan with our last breath." Naruto's turned on his heel and walked forward. "You ready, Lee?" Shikamaru asked him in a whisper. The night air was brisk as the soft wind nipped at them. Ino peered around the building to the Hokage Tower. "The guards are switching any second now. So we have a total of 30 seconds tops before the next shift settles in for duty," she said. "More than enough," Lee said tensely. This was a mission, and as such his usual bravado about flames of youth was tempered a bit. A solid month of harassing the hated Hokage Danzo had made them all somber. The trick was to harass the enemy, but not to inflict anything on the villagers. Shikamaru had come up with plan after plan to make life a living hell for Danzo. All so far had been successful. He grinned a little bit as he remembered the shouts coming from the Hokage Tower when Danzo discovered all the furniture in the entire tower had been turned to dust. Amazing what those bugs of Shino could do, eating that much wood in one night. "Now!" Ino barked at them in a whisper. Lee looked up at the tower and disappeared in a blur, his ankle weights left in a heap by Shikamaru. Lee's speed was unmatched by any genin or chunin in Konoha, and Shikamaru estimated that no jounins would be watching the little window of opportunity they had scouted out. 5 seconds. Lee's feet carried him at an amazing speed up the side of the Hokage Tower in leaps and bounds. He didn't have the chakra needed to stick his feet to the wall, but the sheer momentum he was moving at negated the need for it. 10 seconds. Lee was in the window of the Hokage's office window. A silent whoosh of air shifting the curtains was the only sign of his entry. He had studied the layout of the office before this mission, had even been in it a few times himself, so he knew exactly where to go. 15 seconds. He raced back out the window with the package in his hand. A leap from the window and he was a blur as he hit the ground running. One of the Chunin sentries who was just settling in could have sworn he saw a green blur across the courtyard, but it was gone as he blinked. 20 seconds. Lee rounded the corner back into the alley and stopped abruptly. 3 large figures stood there in the alleyway behind Shikamaru and Ino. Shikamaru looked immobilized, his eyes wide. Ino seemed fearful as well. They had been caught. Lee stiffened, preparing to fight to free his friends, when a hand clamped down on his shoulder. No. A familiar voice to Lee spoke firmly yet in barely a whisper. You will follow us right now before the guards hear us. Lee gulped and a trickle of sweat rolled down his temple. His grip tightened on the Hokage hat he had just stolen. Yes, Gai-sensei. He whispered back as they all disappeared into the shadows. Out of the way! Jiraiya shouted as he came up the river of wind. Truthfully, this was a very smart piece of advice he was giving, as a very large group of very large toads was behind him, each weighed down by packages of equipment and raw materials. Riding 2 of the toads were Tazuna and Inari, the builder and his grandson that Jiraiya had hired. They emerged into the cloud bank and Jiraiya directed each toad that landed to move quickly to the side so that the one behind didn't land on him. It became a very fast-paced game of leapfrog as the previous toad landed, hopped forward, then the other toad landed behind him, and hopped over him, and so on. Within minutes they were all settled and grouped around on the sand of the island itself. Inari and Tazuna stood next to the group and looked around. Their employer had not said much about where they were going, but that was to be expected if they were helping a hidden village. They just hadn't realized how hidden this one was. This is amazing, Tazuna said. In all my years, I would never think a place like this could exist. Jiraiya smiled. Well, the person who discovered it called it Tengaku, heaven, so Naruto decided to keep the name. Tazuna's and Inari's heads whipped around at the same time, the same word on both their lips. Naruto? As if on cue, a loud woohoo broke the calm and the white-clad ninja in question came bursting through the clouds, up the river of wind. He landed much better this time, in a crouched position, one hand touching the ground in front of him. Yes, he thought smugly, that was a perfect entrance. 1 second later, however, the 2 younger twins Baku and Benika fell on him. The rest of the Kazemo clan soon followed, everyone landing on top of Naruto, whose hands was all that showed. Within seconds they had untangled and were staring around at wonder at the island in the sky while Naruto grinned madly. But then Naruto and Senji saw the toads, Jiraiya and a dumbstruck Tazuna and Inari staring at them. Naruto's mouth dropped open. Inari? A wide grin split Inari's face, and he laughed and ran over to greet his friend. Later, around a campfire, they all took stock of where things stood. So Tazuna and Inari here will help build the water plants. When Guerrera gets back, we'll start on the main tower. The Kazemo clan is more than welcome to pitch in where you can. As you can see, we are starting from scratch. Old man Tora smiled. Thank you for inviting us here. I can see the potential in this village as a permanent home for my clan. In truth, we had nowhere else to go besides Konoha, and we've heard bad things lately about the new Hokage there. New Hokage? Naruto's attention now fully on Tora. Yes, an old warmonger named Danzo. A very long time ago, when the Tora clan fought in battles, we had heard of him. Some say he thought of his ninja as nothing more than pawns to win at all costs. A brutal reputation he had. I would not have willingly taken my family to Konoha now. Naruto's eyes grew dark and he put his head down. His old home in the hands of someone who stood completely against the old man, the only person Naruto thought of as Hokage, had once stood for. I've also heard of you, Naruto, Tora said with a weird tinge to his voice. Just a few weeks ago we heard of a town far from here that had been wiped out. Invading pirates had swarmed the city and one man in his anger at the raid waved his hand and destroyed the city and the pirates within. 1/1 city? They said his name was Naruto, a white-clad destroyer of cities, a Shinigami, an angel of death. They all grew quiet and the sound of the crackling embers was all the noise they heard. Jiraiya sensed his mood and decided a diversion was in order. So tomorrow we'll start the work of building this place. Tonight though, why don't you, he gestured to Inari, tell me how you know Naruto. Inari grinned and launched into a tale of how a trio of young ninja had saved their village and their lives. He embellished certain points to make it more grand, but he had everyone laughing and cheering as he reenacted the scenes of battle, most of which he had not seen well into the night. You were reckless and stupid, and of course you would get caught eventually. Did you think you wouldn't? Shikamaru's dad tore into him verbally, lashing out with anger. Shikamaru, Ino, Lee, Chuji, Hinata, Ten, Neji, Kiba, and Shino all stood there as their parents, with one exception, individually berated them in the room they had come to. Shikamaru hadn't been surprised at that point that the others had been rounded up at the same time. They had been discovered completely. Kakashi stood to the side and let the parents deal with their children for a few minutes. He stood guard over Hinata and Neji, as they dared not inform the Hyuga clan of this. When he thought they'd gone far enough, he stepped forward. "It is clear to us that you are seeking to harass the Hokage," Kakashi said loud enough to get everyone's attention. "But then what?" Shikamaru understood the question. The intention was to build up support against Danzo. To undermine his base. His father shook his head. "The intentions are good, but all you've managed to do is make it seem like harmless pranks are being pulled on him. It is not enough." Shikamaru glanced quickly at his father at that last statement. That was more than beratement, that was disappointment in execution, not in their intention. "What you are doing now, did you think that none of us in this room agreed with you? That Danzo is not to be trusted?" Kakashi went on. "The village is not at peace with the decision to make him Hokage. We cannot publicly agree with your actions, but privately, we will encourage and assist." Guy smiled at his student. "Yash!" The fires of youth burn brightly. Overthrowing a leader is a task best suited for this generation indeed. But come to me next time for advice, Lee. Guy-sensei. Lee hugged his mentor. The parents hugged their children. Kakashi turned to Hinata and Neji. "Unfortunately, the Hyugas seem to be in full support of Danzo, so we cannot have your families involved. In fact, now would be a good time to back out for you too." "No," Neji and Hinata said at the same time. Neji continued, "Our village is under threat. We must defend it." Kakashi nodded. "Good. Now Danzo is the head of an underground organization called Root. And do you remember your D-class mission days? How do we remove an old root?" Kiba snorted. "We had to dig all around it, then light it on fire before we could pull it out." Guy grinned. Exactly. Guerrera had arrived in the middle of the night with all his materials strapped to the back of a giant blue ox he had borrowed from a friend who could conjure such things. He had greeted the Tora clan warmly, and the Tora girls Benika and Fuki had immediately taken to fawning over his daughter. Naruto and Senjai stood at the place the future tower of their city would stand. They had cleared out the area and readied it for construction before their little adventure. Naruto had gotten a new pair of white trousers and sandals. Jiraiya had explained to him that if he wanted to start a new village, his reputation was tantamount. So wearing orange was out. Naruto had pouted at that, but Glady put on the trousers and sandals that were thrown at his face by Jiraiya. The shirt lay cast aside for now, as they were about to do some serious manual labor. "Okay!" Naruto shouted and formed the signals. 50 shadow clones appeared, all ready to begin laying stones. Senjai grinned. Naruto's almost unlimited clone-making abilities would help them build this tower in no time. Guerrera approached them with the blueprints he had drawn up. For the first time, Naruto got a good look at the design. It was a solid, smooth round white tower extending 150 feet into the air. From what Naruto could tell in the notes, the windows would be frosted glass with intricate seals and markings to prevent cracking or breaking. The roof of the tower would house what Guerrera only marked as beacon light. Naruto didn't know what that was, so didn't think about it much for the moment. Senjai whistled as he too looked at the plans. "Wow! That's beautiful. Really going with the whole heavenly theme, huh?" He smiled. "Okay, Guerrera, what do we do first?" Tazuna and Inari began unpacking the pipes that Jiraiya had brought. The toads long gone, the packs lay around the lake that was to be the main water source. "You know, Grandpa," Inari said as he hefted some nuts and bolts, "I was thinking maybe when we finish this job, we can stick around here for a while." He glanced over at Tazuna cautiously. "Maybe I could learn to be a fighter like Naruto even." Tazuna didn't look over at Inari. "Why would you want to fight?" Inari looked out over the lake and the sky. "To protect people who can't protect themselves, like Naruto does." Tazuna grunted and passed the rope to Inari. "Do what you wish, grandson. After we finish this job." Naruto and Senjai had begun by creating a pulley system to put the large metal beams that would be the frame of the structure into the ground. Guerrera supervised it all such that by the end of the first day, they had the first of the beams in and the holes for the others already dug. An exhausted Naruto sank to the ground around the campfire. Even with shadow clones, it was a lot of work. This tower wouldn't just appear overnight. He had underestimated how much work it would be. But at the same time, he lay back with a satisfied grin on his face. He was building his own home with his own hands. Jiraiya noticed the smile on Naruto's face and recognized it for what it was. He smiled too, proud of his student. Okay, he called everyone's attention. We have a few things to talk about. Tora stirred the pot of stew he was making for everyone to eat, but he gave Jiraiya his attention. The Kazumi children were playing with Gabriel. Senjai was sharpening his blades. Guerrera just sat with a content face and looked on. Our village name is Tengaku, and Naruto here would like for it to be a powerful village capable of taking in people and protecting them. Do I have that right, Naruto? Naruto nodded, so Jiraiya continued. Well, then we need to organize a few things. The village itself is being built, but Noon knows about us. The very first thing we need is a symbol. Something to represent the ideals of our village. Suggestions? Naruto sat up. He hadn't thought of that. What would they put on their headbands? He scowled. He didn't particularly want to wear another headband. It had been months since he lost his Konoha one, and even though he had his own village now, he didn't feel right putting on another one. But the band could wait for now. Well, what would represent heaven? Naruto asked. Tora walked over and sat down. We are currently in the land with no name, 100 miles west of the last great country. Our village is hidden in the heavens, the heavenly city. Senjai chimed in. We could use the pearly gates, but that just seems wrong. A voice came in from the shadows. I say we put wings on our crest. As we are the warriors of heaven. I think archangels is a good imagery to put out there. Tenchi stepped into the light of the campfire smiling. They all welcomed him back. Jiraiya laughing at his entry. Damn samurai, do you have to be so mysterious? He cocked his head to the side. I like the idea though. The warriors of heaven. Naruto? Naruto grinned madly. Well, if I'm already getting to be known as an angel of death, it makes sense. So we're archangels? He asked Tenchi. Archangels, he corrected Naruto. The warriors of heaven. Naruto felt a chill. I love it. Jiraiya nodded and made a note in his little book. Okay, that settles that. So we have a name for our warriors, and a symbol. I'll design something and show you when I'm done. Now the next step. We already have one clan adopted to our village, the Kazumi clan. What do we do about training? Old man Tora shook his head. I will not force my grandchildren to a life of being warriors. They can make the decision on their own. I myself fought in wars and it's not a pleasant thing. The Kazumi kids grew quiet. The oldest boy, Junya, looked down. I'd like to learn to fight. Our parents were killed, and Baku and Beneka's as well. And the way those men were torturing and playing with my sister. I need to get stronger to protect them. Inari had tears in his eyes, hearing familiar words. I too would like to learn how to fight. After glancing to his grandfather though, he added, after we finish our job, of course. I'd like to stay here. Naruto stood up, tears in eyes too. I'd be happy if you stayed, Inari. You too, Tazuna. Junya, I'll make sure you can protect your sister and your family. Tora sighed. Since I'm not much other use, I'll begin instruction on the children who want to learn. If Junya is doing it, then so is Fuki. Fuki nodded shyly. I will set aside an area tomorrow for a warrior academy. Since we have people from all over the known world, I think I'd like to suggest we don't only study ninja arts. We already have samurai, ninja, and a luchador. Naruto nodded. I think that makes sense. But then he looked puzzled. What's a luchador? Guerrera, Jiraiya and Tenchi laughed. Naruto, you really should learn about your opponents before you fight them. Guerrera is a luchador. A masked wrestler or grappler. It's a strong one-on-one fighting style. Tenchi said. Oh, Naruto laughed. That's okay then. So we aren't training ninjas, we're training warriors. Warrior angels. They laughed and settled into more casual talk for the rest of the evening. Gaara entered the village of Konoha followed by his entourage of 30 visible ninja. The Hokage had requested this meeting months ago, but Gaara was new in his post as Kazekage and couldn't leave so early in his tenure. In truth, he didn't even want to come here, the village that had scorned his one friend Naruto, but in his official capacity he had to put aside those issues. He just hoped he could maintain his calm around Danzo. Fortunately, or unfortunately, his visit coincided with another diplomat. The daimyo himself. The Fire Lord and his train of courtesans and bodyguards easily took up the entire street. Gaara scowled as he fell in line behind the daimyo as tradition dictated he did. Danzo stared down at them from his balcony, his eyes wide. He had no prior knowledge of the arrival of either party. The usual courtesies hadn't been prepared. He called on his trusted aides, remnants of his root organization. "What's the meaning of this? Did you know?" he demanded of his first officer. "No, sir, no message was received informing us," Danzo swore vehemently. He raced down the stairs to greet the arriving diplomats and Gaara the Kazekage he had wanted to meet alone. His carefully crafted assassination plot to kill Gaara was out the door now. He couldn't do anything with the daimyo here. He flung open the doors to the Hokage Tower just as the daimyo stopped short of it. "Greetings, Your Eminence. I wasn't aware you were coming," he gritted out behind the widest smile he could muster. Gaara watched him curiously from next to the daimyo. "I see the usual manners of your predecessor have been forgotten," the daimyo said irritably. "My feet haven't touched dirt floor in some time. I shall be sure to remember this experience, Hokage. Where is your hat?" Danzo cursed mentally. The red carpet hadn't been rolled out. He didn't notice as the guard next to him eyes glazed over for the briefest of seconds, but enough to stumble forward and push Danzo from behind. Danzo wasn't expecting it and fell helplessly into the daimyo. The both of them tumbled down the stairs of the Hokage Tower. Gaara looked on in shock while his advisor and Sensei Baki looked across the courtyard to the rooftop of a nearby shop where Aina and her father stood looking down on the proceedings. Truthfully, all the rooftops had families watching the great Fire Lord's entrance. So his tumble with Danzo brought an audible gasp from the crowd. Inoichi Yamanaka very subtly winked at his daughter, having just re-entered his body. Ino smiled at her dad and looked back at the flailing arms and dust spectacle before them. It was going to be an interesting visit by the daimyo. By the third day, Naruto was working alongside 150 clones of himself. They were evenly divided building the tower, the water plant, and the wind turbines. He had also thrown a few into training. As he realized he remembered everything they learned, it just felt wrong to forget about training just because he was busy with his village. Jiraiya had come up with a symbol for their village. A pair of sharp, angular wings cut out of the metal background of the headband. Naruto loved it. Naruto was thinking though about something Senjai had said the night before. Senjai?" he asked as he handed him another large brick. "Do you remember last night, where you said I should be careful I don't fall off the island again and float away to the sea or something?" Senjai scowled. The sun was blazing them today. "Yes, I remember." "Why?" Naruto grinned. He made the familiar hand signs and pumped out another 50 clones. "Okay, let's do this," he shouted at them. The clones all ran off in different directions. "What are you doing?" Senjai asked. Simple Naruto smiled as he went back to work. "I remember everything when my clones dissipate. So I'll send each one to find another path of wind off and back on the island. And I'll keep doing it till we have it all mapped out." Senjai laughed. "Good idea, Naruto. Maybe next trip we don't have to walk back." One particular Naruto clone was flying faster than he thought possible as an extremely fast stream of wind had him hurtling fast through the atmosphere eastwards. For what felt like a little more than an hour he zoomed past clouds high above the ground. He felt the excitement and rush of flying and really wished he could learn to do this without streams. He felt the stream start to weaken. And he thought it would be a slow descent like before. But this time, he suddenly was let go, the stream too weak to carry him anymore. He screamed as he fell to earth. As he broke the cloud bank he saw a village directly beneath him, a village that looked all too familiar. The village elders looked in disgust at Danzo as he apologized to the daimyo profusely, helping him back up. The daimyo was incensed. "I do not think I will stay here any further. I've suffered enough embarrassment at the hands of your hospitality." He turned to go when they heard a growing scream. They looked up just in time to see a half-naked boy. The clone was just wearing white pants, with yellow hair hit both of them at full force from a height of hundreds of feet. The clone was instantly dissipated in a puff of smoke. Danzo and the daimyo lay unconscious in the street. Kakashi whistled low from a nearby rooftop. "Okay, that I did not expect."